Adesanya. I research every single fight on every single UFC card in the way that I'm going to do it on this live stream. Just obviously today we're going to be doing it as a group together on this live stream to see if we can dig up a decent bet on this fight between Du Plessis and Adesanya this weekend. So if you're watching this video after the fact on YouTube, after the live stream has gone out, that's why there's no timestamps or structure or anything like that. We're literally just working through this fight, researching it and doing our best to see if we can dig up any bets. So before we go any further, let me just check that the live stream is working. Let me just see if we're working. So we are we working? Hey, what's up, Hilts? What's up, Hilts? Can you see me on stream? Let me know if you can see me on stream, man. Let me know if it's working. In fact, I'll go to my channel. Sorry about this, guys. I'm just trying to see if we're live. Okay, we're live. We're live. We're live. We're live. All right. All right. All right. We're live. Okay, cool. So YouTube's working. Twitch. I think we're live on Twitch as well. And we're also live on Twitter. All right, here we go. Okay, cool. So nice one, guys. Sorry for that little messy beginning there. So yeah, what we're going to be doing is basically researching this Du Plessis versus Adesanya fight, and we're going to be going through it, and we're going to be doing our best to dig up a bet on this matchup. So this is just basically the process that I always use to research every fight on every UFC card. And if you guys can help me out with it, let me know what you think. That'd be really useful. So what we'll do, as ever, is start off by taking a look at the odds. So we can see that both guys are in this even money odds range, which is really cool, because whenever you've got two fighters in the even money odds range, if you can just kind of lean 60-40 one way or the other, you could have a pretty good bet on your hands. So Izzy is the favourite at average odds of about 1.77, which is going to be minus 130 for an implied probability of 57%. And if we take a look at the odds on Du Plessis, he's going to be around an average of 2.05, which is going to be plus 105 for an implied probability of 49%. So Du Plessis is 30 years old, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. Adesanya, 35 years old, 6'4" with an 80-inch reach. So what's kind of interesting about Izzy is he's slowly creeping up there in age. So 35 years old is getting pretty old. He's obviously only just turned 35 last month. But for a guy like Izzy that relies so much on speed, reflexes and athleticism, 35 years old is getting pretty old now, because obviously reflexes are one of the first things to go. We saw it with, Anderson Silva, probably the best example, a guy that Izzy has modelled his career on. And so as a result, it'll be interesting to see for how much longer Izzy can retain that sharpness on the feet, that great ability to use his length to slip shots and just stay that slight bit outside the range where he can be hit. So Izzy's getting pretty old now. In contrast, Du Plessis, 30 years old, he's going to be making big improvements from fight to fight, and we're definitely seeing massive improvement in him, which we're obviously going to see when we research this matchup and take a look at some of his past fights. Which reminds me, I bring the countdown timer up. There we go. There we go. Okay, so all right then. So both guys are around the same size. You can see that Izzy is a little bit longer and taller, 4-inch reach advantage, a little bit taller. And obviously Izzy definitely knows how to use the reach, but I don't think Izzy's reach is going to make a massive difference in this matchup. And there are trade-offs, because obviously what Du Plessis is going to give up in that 4-inch reach advantage, for Izzy, he makes up for in power, physicality, explosiveness. He's very, very tanky. Obviously, for having a 4-inch reach advantage is nice for Izzy, but Izzy fights long. He's a very technical striker anyway, and I don't think Du Plessis' path to victory in this are going to be winning a nice technical kickboxing match in the middle of the octagon. That's not going to suit Du Plessis' style. That's not going to be his easiest path to victory. So, where do we begin with this one? I think, obviously, before we get into watching the past fights of both guys, we want to go into everything with a fresh, open mind. But at the same time, obviously, both these guys have had a lot of fights in the UFC. We do know a lot about them, so we've got to use what we know about their past fights to basically give us the best kind of workflow for researching this fight in the best, most useful way. And what I find really interesting about this matchup this weekend is that both guys have been quite inconsistent. When it comes to Du Plessis, there are explanations for the inconsistency. When it comes to Adesanya, there are, there aren't logical explanations for the inconsistency, at least. So we'll talk a bit about what those inconsistencies are before we watch the fights, just so that when we're watching the fights, it makes sense. So if we start off with Du Plessis, because he's kind of the easiest one to work out. So when we did a similar live stream research session for Du Plessis' last fight against Sean Strickland, when we researched his past fights against Derek Brunson, Darren Till, Brad Tavares, Du Plessis looked terrible, like very, very bad, very, very low level. And going into the Strickland fight, we were saying that, if Du Plessis shows up and performs like he did in these 3 matchups, he's obviously going to be in a lot of trouble because of how badly he gassed out against Till and Brunson in particular. But going into the Strickland fight, there was the narrative around Du Plessis having nose surgery to correct, damage to his nose that prevented him from breathing properly. And Du Plessis and his coach spoke about this in the build-up of the Strickland fight and said, it's been really difficult for him to breathe in fights. It's been affecting his cardio. And now that he's had nose surgery, he's going to look a lot better against Sean Strickland. And we didn't know if that was true or not. Turned out to be true, because his cardio did look a lot better against Sean Strickland. So that's a little bit of inconsistency with Du Plessis' performances. And we'll probably watch the Brunson fight just so, for anyone not too familiar with it, you can kind of see the issues with Du Plessis' cardio before he had the nose surgery. But with him only being 30 years old, continually improving, having the nose surgery, and also since we've had no USADA drug testing since early this year, the likelihood is Du Plessis will look at least as good as he did against Strickland, maybe even better. So it's only 10 minutes long. We'll have a quick look at the Brunson fight to kick things off, just so that those of you, because there is a lot of, what I find is there's certain fighters in the UFC that people just don't have a particularly good read on in terms of the full kind of picture of a fighter's strengths and weaknesses and capabilities. Is kind of, they look at just specific performances or like quick finishes and form an opinion off that. So even though I don't think that Du Plessis is going to be, as bad as he looked against Brunson, we also can't dismiss it. We've got to take a look at it, keep an open mind on it, because you don't know, maybe the Strickland fight was just a one-off where all the stars aligned and it was an anomalous performance. That's definitely the least likely outcome, but we want to see how he looked against Brunson, just so that when we're live betting this fight on Saturday night, in our mind, if Du Plessis starts to look like he did against Brunson, we'll know what to expect as the fight progresses. So then if we take a look at Israel Adesanya, obviously there's issues with consistency with him as well, because he looked extremely gun shy, didn't throw a particularly high volume of strikes in his last fight against Sean Strickland. Strickland's not a guy that really has too much power in his hands, and yet, Izzy looked very reluctant to engage in that fight. And what I do find interesting about that is obviously in the talk after the fight from Izzy and his team and his coaches, they were kind of saying that, it was just an off night for Izzy. He wasn't really feeling it, that kind of thing. And, obviously, we're not betting on robots. That's quite common for fighters to have off nights. But what I do find interesting about the Sean Strickland performance is Izzy is getting quite old, right? So he's 35 years old. He's had 27 pro MMA fights. God knows how many kickboxing fights, right? He's probably had, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 fights at least at this point with kickboxing and MMA combined. And so when you look at this performance here, on one hand, we can say it was an off night for Izzy and he just wasn't feeling it. But what I noticed about his performance against Strickland, and obviously we're going to watch it back, but what I noticed in that fight was he looked very passive, very tentative, very gun shy. And this is a kind of behavior and a change in fighting style that we see very technical strikers like Lyoto Machida, Anderson Silva demonstrate later on in their career, where they just become very gun shy, very passive. They don't pull the trigger as much. They don't throw as high a volume of strikes. And we even see it with more aggressive guys like Robbie Lawler, right? If you look at Robbie Lawler when he was, in that period in his career where he's floating around the UFC title picture, and then after a few years he got into his late 30s, he started to become very tentative and gun shy. So, well, for me, I'm keeping a very open mind with Izzy, because there are lots of explanations for him having an off night. He might have just had an off night. He might not have been feeling it. Might have struggled with Strickland's awkwardness. He might have just been, tired or injured. Maybe he's dealing with some self-doubt. Maybe he just had an off night. Maybe he's declining. There's lots of explanations, but we have seen very different sides of Du Plessis and Izzy. What I do find interesting about this matchup is you've got to put a lot of weight on the very last time we saw a fighter, because their last fight is going to give us like the best indicator. Oh my god, track me. Is my camera gone crazy? Let me just check. I think my camera's gone off. Oh, it's gone crazy. Why has it done that? Sorry guys. My camera just went crazy for no reason. There we go, we're back. So yeah, what I do find interesting about Izzy and Du Plessis is, just minimize that. What I do find crazy about Izzy and Du Plessis is, you're only as good as your last fight, right? And your last fight gives us the best indicator of what to expect in like upcoming fights. And in Du Plessis' last performance against Strickland, he put in the best performance of his career. Whereas in Izzy's last performance, he put in one of his worst performances of his career. So, is this a situation where, at 35 years old, Izzy's on that downward career trajectory now? Du Plessis, 30 years old, relatively young for a middleweight. He's young, he's hungry, he's improving. Is he on that upward career trajectory? Is this like a passing of the guard? So something interesting to think about. This fight is obviously taking place in Australia. I know Izzy's from New Zealand, but you'd think Izzy would have the crowd on his side. If any of you, obviously, I haven't checked the comments yet while we're doing the intro, but if any of you are from Australia, let me know. Will any of the New Zealand fighters like Dan Hooker, Izzy, although he's rocking the Nigerian flag, but we know he lives and trains in New Zealand. Let me know if the New Zealanders will have kind of home advantage. Obviously the Aussies will, but let me know what you think about that. So with that being said, I think it's about time we get into some fight footage. So what I want to do first of all is basically watch the fight, which I think is going to be least relevant to trying to figure out if there's a decent bet on this fight. And I think the fight that we need to watch, which probably isn't all that relevant because, you know, I do think Duplessis' nose surgery probably had a big part to play in how bad he looked in these 3 fights, or his nose injury had a big part to play in these 3 fights. So let's get into watching the Duplessis fight, and then we can kind of tick it off the list, and then we want to put a lot of weight on these 2 performances. I think these are going to give us the best kind of indicator as to what to expect from Duplessis this weekend. So let me know, guys, if the stream's okay and everything. Let me know what you think, and yeah, let's get into it, man. Alright, so the way this is going to work is I will drop in the links to watch this fight on Fight Pass and ESPN Plus, and we'll sync it up Joe Rogan style, Fight Companion style, with a stop clock type thing, and we'll just kind of, if I put that, like, see if you can see that. Yeah, you can see that. Oh, actually we can put it up here, even better, right? So just sync it up when we start the round, and we can watch the fight together, research it together, and then hopefully dig up a bet on this fight. I think the thing I'm most looking forward to is taking a look at how Duplessis' wrestling looked in the Strickland fight. I know there was a little bit of wrestling from him in the second half of the matchup, and obviously Izzy's takedown offense and ground game looked really, really bad last time we really saw it tested against Blachowicz. I don't put a whole lot of weight on Izzy being able to stop Vettori from taking him down. I think Duplessis is a much more physically imposing grappler than Vettori, so we'll put a big emphasis on that Blachowicz versus Izzy fight. So right, let me grab you guys the link. So let's watch Brunson. Actually, I tell you what, let's not watch the Brunson fight. Let's watch the Darren Till fight instead. Only because even though the Darren Till fight was slightly longer ago, it is only like a 3-month difference between these 2 fights. And I think the Darren Till fight will be more relevant to the Israel Adesanya fight, because obviously Darren Till's a striker, whereas, you know, there was some grappling in the Brunson fight. So let's watch the Darren Till fight instead. And all we're doing is showing you guys that there are issues with the cardio. There are issues with the cardio of Duplessis, but they probably aren't there anymore post nose surgery. Do you know, Axe and me, I don't actually log into Tapology. I didn't even know. Can you set up accounts? I just kind of use it. I just use it, man. I see there's a forum here, but I don't really post on forums and stuff like that, so I've never signed up. I just kind of use it for, I find their like MMA records look better than Sherdog and stuff. Alright, so you could be right, I think, Wiz, mate. Alright, so let's now get into Brunson versus Till. And really, this is just so that if we're live betting this fight and Duplessis does start to look similar to how he looked against Darren Till, we can obviously identify it and then know how the fight is likely to go. So if you could sync up the first round of Duplessis versus Till for me, get it right at the point the fight's going to start, and then we'll watch this fight together. Live bet, won't live bet it together. Won't live bet it together, but we'll watch this fight together and then see if we can learn anything from it. Alright. Alright, let's get it going. So start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So, going into the Duplessis versus Sean Strickland fight, when we were watching this matchup, we were saying that if Duplessis shows up and performs like he did here against Till, Strickland is going to run through him and dominate. So what I'm really looking forward to is going from like a direct comparison of the version of Duplessis we got here, and then looking at him and how much he had improved going into the Strickland fight. So a nice double leg takedown there from Duplessis. Till immediately scrambles over to the cage, and you can see Duplessis chipping away from back control with this ground and pound. You would think, to be fair, that if the fight stays standing, Izzy's going to have the advantage. Obviously, he might not have the power advantage, but he's certainly going to be a more technical striker than Duplessis. But, like I say, we've seen Jan Blachowicz cause Izzy problems with grappling in the past. And Izzy does have that body type where he's very weak in the lower body, those skinny legs, which means, you know, if a big strong guy like Duplessis gets in deep on those legs, might not be that difficult to take Izzy down. So what I will say about this performance, which is why I'm looking forward to seeing Duplessis against Strickland, is even though Duplessis is having a lot of success with his grappling right now, just chipping away at Till from back control, there's a lot of mistakes that Till's making here in kind of allowing Duplessis to have this position. Like you can see that Duplessis doesn't have control of his body here, yet Till's not showing any urgency to work through this. And he's not trying to turn into Duplessis and get to the body lock to stop Duplessis from throwing punches. You know, he's not trying to circle out of here. Duplessis doesn't have control of his body, but yet Till is just standing here allowing Duplessis to punch him in the face. What we know about Izzy, and we've seen this in the Vettori fight, is that he does show a lot of urgency to work out of bad positions. You're not going to see Izzy kind of standing in this clinch position, allowing Duplessis to smash him with this ground and pound. So it's not good fight IQ from Till. We know that. That's why he's not in the UFC anymore. And again, Till just giving up a very, very cheap takedown there. But nice back take from Duplessis. Goes the body triangle as well. What I am noticing from Duplessis though is how much power he's generating on this ground and pound. Hard, heavy shots from both the clinch and his back control position. And this back control looks nice from Duplessis, man. Nice tight body triangle. Obviously, Till isn't really offering up much resistance. We know that. It's the kind of guy Till is. We saw the same in his fight against Derek Brunson. But Duplessis making the best of him, making him pay for the mistakes that he's making. What I do like from Duplessis though in this back take is that he's gone to the body triangle. Because for a middleweight at 6'1", Duplessis isn't that tall. He's got like that smaller, more muscular, more compact frame, and guys like that can often struggle to keep back control because their legs aren't long enough to dig two nice deep hooks in. So when you see a guy like Duplessis go to the body triangle, it's reassuring, because it's obviously going to be a lot harder for someone like Darren Till to work out of a position like this than if Duplessis just went to hooks. But he did lose that position. Darren Till back up to his feet now. So 30 seconds left to go. You can already see though, after just one round, Duplessis' mouth is open wide. And you know what will be interesting? It'll be interesting to look at Duplessis' kind of body language in this fight against Till, where his mouth is already wide open, and then compare how he looks in the Strickland fight and see if his mouth isn't as open, because obviously his mouth being open would indicate he's struggling to breathe through his nose, which that nose surgery would have corrected, right? So sync up round 2 for me, which starts at 8 minutes and 3 seconds on Fight Pass. That's 8 minutes 3 seconds on Fight Pass. 8 minutes 3 seconds. Alright, 8 minutes 3 seconds. And let's get it going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So Plessis doing an enormous amount of damage in that round. Very, very nice. But you can see he's tired, right? You can see he's pretty tired after that first round. So it's good to burn this into our brain, get this fresh in our mind, so then when we now go and watch him against Strickland, we'll be able to compare his body language, his breathing patterns, his movement across the 2 fights back to back, which will be really useful. You can see Plessis definitely looking flat here after that first round. Very slow. His mouth is wide open. When you look at this fight, right, so if you guys remember, we placed a bet on Sean Strickland to beat Plessis. And what's cool about Fight Research is you get to go back and see if you placed a bad bet or not. And when you can see how flat Plessis looks at the beginning of this second round, you can absolutely see why we bet Sean Strickland. Because if you visualize Sean Strickland in there against this version of Plessis, you can see it would have been a pretty easy fight for Strickland. You know, you can see, you know, we're only 7 minutes into this fight, or 6.5 minutes. Look how sloppy and tired Plessis looks. Mouth wide open. Look at that slow hand speed. Flat footwork. Just Plessis looking slow and flat and sloppy. So you can see why we bet Strickland here. But it's going to be really useful now going and watching that Strickland fight, seeing how much he's improved. And then we get to see you know, Adesanya against Strickland as well, which is awesome, because when you've got a common opponent, I find this way easier to visualize how the fighters match up, right? When you see him against a common opponent, it's much easier to get a read on how the fight between the two is going to play out. So you can see in this round, low volume from Plessis. Mouth wide open, has been since the end of round 1. Sloppy striking, bad defensively. Hand speed very slow. No power in his shots at all. Like you can see, he's just really got no power in his hands. He's completely depleted here. So his nose must have been in a terrible state, man. For him to look this bad, his nose must have been absolutely devastated. And obviously Darren Till's cruising here, just chipping away at him from a safe distance. And this is why it is important to... This is why it's really important to watch this fight though, right? Because on one hand we could say the reason why Plessis looked a lot better against Strickland was because the nose surgery corrected his breathing issues. But at the same time, fighters are inconsistent. So it's useful to watch this fight so that, you know, if we're live betting this fight on Saturday night and Plessis starts to look like this, well, we'll know he's likely going to be in a lot of trouble. Because, you know, if Izzy were in the position that Darren Till is in, he's not going to be getting taken down as easily as Till gets taken down, I believe, in the 3rd round. And Izzy's just going to stay on top of Plessis and keep lighting him up. I mean, look how bad Plessis looks here, man. So flat, so slow, no power. Desperation takedown from miles outside of Till's range. Till has no takedown defense, so he gives up that single leg. You're not going to get that with Izzy. Izzy's a lot harder to hold down. And he's much better at scrambling back up to his feet than Till is as well. So like I say, I don't expect du Plessis to look like this. I don't expect him to look as bad as this. But for the purposes of live betting, it's going to be useful just to have it burnt into our brain for Saturday night, so that when we are live betting the fight, we can keep a very open mind about, you know, the different versions of both guys that are possible. And when we watch the fight early on, first round or two, should be able to get a pretty good read on what version of both guys are going to show up, which is going to enable us to predict who's more likely to win the fight with quite a good degree of accuracy. So if we sync up the third round now, which starts at 14 minutes and 23 seconds on Fight Pass. That's 14 minutes 23 on Fight Pass. I've got a lot of we'll catch up on some YouTube comments as well, man, while you sync up that third round. Do you know what, Axon, man? I don't think Till was that bad. I just think he had no takedown defense and no ground game at all. Like, he's one of those weird guys that he was like athletic. He had really good striking. But, like, for whatever reason, he just had no balance, and all that athleticism we saw in his striking just wasn't present in his ground game at all. It was just bizarre, man. Till's striking was very good. It was just his takedown defense and ground game that let him down, and I don't know why he never improved it. Yeah, Axon, I do agree with you that du Plessis will struggle to get Izzy down. 100% agree with you, he'll struggle to get Izzy down. But I think the Izzy versus Jan Blachowicz fight is going to be really useful to watch, because du Plessis and Blachowicz have got similar sort of body types where they've just got like that tankiness, that physicality about them, where they're very heavy from top position. So even though I think it'll be hard for du Plessis to get Izzy down, if he does get Izzy down and gets on top of him, he may be able to hold Izzy down easily. So it'll be interesting to watch that Blachowicz fight to see how Izzy looked off his back. Kaboomin is saying Izzy at Pick'em odds is a gift. It's hard, right? Like, I don't really know how I feel about this fight yet until I watch Strickland versus du Plessis, because I lost a lot of money on Strickland because I watched this fight, du Plessis versus Till. I watched du Plessis versus Brunson. I watched du Plessis versus Brad Tavares. I was like, Strickland is going to walk through this guy. Like, Strickland's levels and levels and levels above du Plessis. But then we get a completely different version of du Plessis in the fight. So I don't really know how I feel about how he matches up with Izzy yet. Because when you look at this fight against Till, yeah, Izzy fucking smokes him. Like, if this version of du Plessis shows up, du Plessis hasn't got a chance against Izzy. But it'll be interesting to see how he looked against Strickland. Because I know he looked very different, man. Hey, what's up, Joey, mate? Hope you're doing good, dude. Yeah, Joey is going to bet Izzy as well. And Pep is saying what we see every week, right? Every week, there's people on both sides of a fight like this that think the odds are a gift. What I will say, man, what I will say to Pep's point, I could be completely wrong. From my experience, though, if ever you get a UFC fight that is in the even money odds range, no matter how you feel about a fight, or no matter how someone tells you the fight is likely to go, and no matter how good they are, if the fight's in the even money odds range, is never a gift, because the odds are never going to be that inaccurate. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be a good bet, and it doesn't mean there can't be good value there. But the odds are not going to be like massively off in the even money odds range, because if they were, like, the betting market would have just corrected them. You know what I mean? So when people are like, oh, this guy's a lock, this guy's a gift, in the even money odds range, if you do feel that, they price some things you haven't thought about. That's just my experience. And you guys know, like, the majority of bets I place are in the even money odds range. So it doesn't mean you can't find good bets in the even money odds range, but you're not going to find guys that are like absolute locks in this odds range, because otherwise they wouldn't be in the even money odds range. You know, that's just how I feel about it. Kaboomin saying this is probably Izzy's easiest matchup in the top 5. It will be interesting to see the Strickland performance for sure. Because if it was just an off night for Strickland and Duplessis doesn't look a whole lot better than he does against Till, just with better cardio, I agree with you, Izzy could be a great bet. But what I will say before we get into watching the fights is, like, there is, like, one thing I've learned over the last couple of years, which I wish I would have learned sooner, but I've only really learned this in the last couple of years, is you can't underestimate the importance of, like, will to win. So when you look, if you look at, like, Duplessis and then you look at Izzy, like, from a technical point of view, Izzy is clearly a significantly better fighter than Duplessis. Like, he's so much better than him. But you can't quantify, like, that doggedness and that will to win. Do you know what I mean? Like, guys like Eddie Alvarez, Nate Diaz, Tony Ferguson, they built a career off it. And Duplessis definitely has that. I feel like Duplessis is one of those guys that you have to practically kill in order to finish, right? He's just got such a strong will to win. He's got such a determined, never say die attitude. And when you look at Izzy's performance against Strickland, I'm not sure he has that. Like, obviously we need to watch it back, but I don't think you'd ever get a performance from Duplessis like we saw from Izzy against Strickland, just because I feel Duplessis would rather die than perform without giving his best. And you can't like underestimate how big of a deal that is. And to, like, Hilty's point, when you look at Izzy's performance against Strickland, it just doesn't look like Izzy can match that fire. And you guys know me, right? You guys know me. You know, I've been really critical of Duplessis. If you watch my breakdown of his fight going into the Strickland matchup, I said, look, you know, Strickland's levels and levels and levels and levels and levels above him. Which, again, looking at this Darren Till fight back, is probably the correct thing to say, right? Because Duplessis looks terrible in this Till fight. But he does have a very strong will to win. He's determined. He's getting better from fight to fight. So, you know, this is a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal, man. So John Brown is saying that Dricus Duplessis' footwork is kind of square and flat, which will make it really easy for Izzy to kind of pick him off with the jabs and the leg kicks. That is a really good point, to be fair. We're probably not going to go and watch Izzy's fight against Paulo Costa, just because it was such a long time ago. It's probably not worth it. But if you guys remember the Costa fight, remember Costa came forward, took control of the centre of the octagon, and Izzy stayed on the outside. But Izzy didn't really box. He just stayed on the outside, and he hammered Costa's lead legs with those leg kicks. And he caused Costa big problems to the point where he damn near stopped Costa with leg kicks. Like, Costa just couldn't really move well anymore. And with how, like, John Brown's bringing up a really good point, with how flat-footed Duplessis is, how square he stands. Yeah, that's a great point, man. He's going to be really susceptible if Izzy does come in with a very heavy leg kicks based that's a bit of a tongue twister. Leg kicks based strategy, which we know Izzy doesn't always do, but he did in that Costa fight. And to be fair, Duplessis probably wants to try and pressure Izzy in the same way as Costa did, right? So that he can make it more difficult for Izzy to use his length, and Duplessis can impose his physicality on him. Hey, what's up, Big Mac, mate? What's that? Pepino FX. Pepino is saying Duplessis will bully and outmuscle Izzy. Easy takedowns and will outstrike Izzy because he'll force him backward, and Izzy is horrible backward. You know, the only thing I would say to rebuttal that, mate, Duplessis does have a similar sort of body type to Vettori. Vettori obviously doesn't have the same power with his striking. He doesn't have the same power in his hands, but Vettori is a very physically imposing grappler. He's got that tankiness about his grappling, and so Vettori really struggled to get Izzy down. If Vettori struggled to get Izzy down, you'd think Duplessis would struggle as well. Like, if Duplessis does get him down, Izzy's likely going to be in a lot of trouble, but I don't think he'll get him down easily. Could be wrong. Yeah, that Izzy versus Joel fight was a long time ago, right, Big Mac, mate? Yeah, Vera for sure. So Sean is very flat-footed, but that's why a few moments ago I was saying Izzy can cause Duplessis problems if he does throw a high volume of leg kicks, which he doesn't always do, but he did against Costa. I don't think he did against Strickland, but we'll soon find out. So what's pretty cool about this chat at the moment is, hey, what's up, Taz, mate? Hope you're doing good. What's pretty cool about this chat is it seems really split. Like, I can see like half a kind of picking Duplessis, half a picking Izzy. And what usually happens when we do these streams, not always, but what usually happens is when we research a really interesting fight like this where people are torn, usually by the end of the live stream everyone is in agreement who the better bet is. So we'll see if everyone's still very divided by the end. Let's watch this third round now between Duplessis and Till. So let's start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And let's get through this third round, and then let me know what fight you guys think we should watch next. Maybe we'll watch the... If we watch the Pereira versus Adesanya rematch next, just because that fight only lasts 2 rounds, I think, and then we've seen a little bit of Duplessis and a little bit of Izzy before we go into watching their very most recent fights. Or actually, we could go all the way back to Izzy versus Blachowicz, because we're talking a lot about Duplessis' chances of using a grappling heavy game plan, and once we see a little bit of Izzy's takedown offense and ground game, and then we go and watch Duplessis versus Strickland, where he did take Strickland down, we'll be able to hopefully visualize what the chances of Duplessis using grappling against Izzy will be. And like, you can see this version. Do you know what's really annoying, man? What is really annoying about what I do is when you place a bet that you think is a good bet and it loses, and then you come back and you watch like the fights that kind of led you to placing that bet, can be really frustrating, because like obviously I said I lost a lot of money when I bet Strickland to beat Duplessis, and now I'm watching this fight back and it was a good bet, because if Strickland would have fought this version of Duplessis, he probably would have won easily, but he just got a completely different version. And that's why betting on MMA can be really difficult, because you never know what version of a fighter you're going to get. You never know what game plan and strategy they're going to use. Like, look at Carl Williams last weekend. He waited until the 3rd round against a guy with no takedown defense, Janata Denise, before he started to wrestle. Like, if you had bet Williams last weekend, it's so frustrating, because the 3rd round kind of showed that if Williams would have grappled more, he likely would have won easily. But he chose not to grapple until round 3, and that was a difficult thing to predict. So that's like, in some ways, that's why fight research is really useful, because when you go back and you watch the fights that led you to place certain bets, you can see whether you placed a bad bet or whether you did, you know, place a good bet and it just lost. It's good because you get to kind of check yourself like that, which keeps you sharp, but it's also frustrating because you're like, fuck me, man, like this was a giant trap, because when you watch this, you have to bet Strickland, but this ain't the version of du Plessis that we got. But I will also say this. From the end of the first round of this fight, du Plessis' mouth was wide open, and then in round 2 he did look very badly gassed, but he did appear to catch a bit of a second wind in this third round. Like, he did move a bit better in this third round. And from memory, I think a similar thing happened in the Strickland fight, where in rounds 1 and 2, I think du Plessis was looking a bit tired, and then du Plessis actually caught a second wind and looked fresher than Strickland in rounds 3, 4 and 5. Obviously, I'm just talking from memory. That might be completely wrong, but it'll be interesting to see if that's what happened when we go back and watch it, because du Plessis might be one of these guys, and this is quite rare, to be fair, so this is quite a difficult thing to read, but occasionally you do get guys, and I can't think of any now of how rare it is, but you do get guys that will look tired, but then they will kind of catch second wins, and they will not perform as tired as they look, if that makes sense. I know that doesn't make much sense, but it's kind of a hard thing to describe. You kind of saw it there, right? Du Plessis' volume dropped in round 2. He looked slow, sloppy, slow hand speed, no power in his hands, mouth wide open. And then in the third round, he was looking a little bit better. He moved a bit better, a little bit lighter on his feet. Pretty sure we saw the same pattern against Strickland. Alright, so let's watch a bit of Izzy now. So we definitely want to watch the Blachowicz fight, which I know is a bit annoying because it's a very long time ago. But obviously Cannonier is a striker, Whittaker's a striker. These two are stand-up fights. Vettori did grapple, but he wasn't able to get Izzy down. And ideally, I want to see Izzy on the ground. From memory, I don't think Vettori actually managed to get him down, whereas Blachowicz did. How long is it between the Vettori and Blachowicz fights? Oh, it's only 3 months. Alright. Okay, that's cool. So, we'll watch the Blachowicz fight, because we actually get to see Izzy on the ground after being taken down. And because there's only 3 months difference between these fights, he's unlikely to have improved that much. Now, obviously, he could have improved a lot since the Blachowicz fight, because it was 3 years ago. However, we haven't seen it because Whittaker's a striker, Cannonier's a striker, Pereira's a striker. I don't think Strickland tried to take him down from memory, although I could be wrong. So we haven't really seen Izzy's takedown defense tested since 2021. But what I would say is exactly what we said about Pani Kianzad last weekend. And because Izzy's had 27 pro fights, he's 35 years old, it's unlikely you're going to see like massive improvement in his takedown defense, in my opinion, from like his fights 3 years ago, because you'd think he would be at the stage in his career where he would be like plateauing or declining now at 35. Like, your balance doesn't get better as you get older, so his technique might have improved a bit, but his athleticism, his physicality and his balance wouldn't have. So I think we should watch, if we watch the Blachowicz fight, because we're all talking a lot about du Plessis' potential to grapple here, but when we watch the du Plessis fight, we may feel differently about it. The Blachowicz fight, we might feel differently. So I know it was a long time ago, but we've got to watch it because we actually get to see Izzy on his back. So I'll drop the links in the YouTube chat. I'll grab you the ESPN Plus link now. If you could sync that one up for me, guys. And we will get into it now. Obviously, this fight was at light heavyweight as well. We'll just catch up on some comments as well. We flip this over. So Connor is saying that he thinks that the media storm, like the pressure put on Izzy being the champ, had a bigger impact on him underperforming against Sean than anything else. Hey, what's up, Trenton, mate? Hope you're doing good, mate. Trenton saying that Duplessis might be on some PEDs. Obviously, right, at the end of the day, I'm not going to accuse any fighter of anything. But if you've been watching the UFC for a long time, and I know many of you watching this have been, if we think back to like 2015, 2016, when USADA first come into the UFC, we had guys like, you know, Anthony Pettis, Johnny Hendricks, Luke Rockhold. I mean, these guys were in discussion as being potentially the greatest fighters of all time, right? I remember back in like 2015, 2016, people were talking about doing a super fight between Luke Rockhold and John Jones and saying, you know, Luke Rockhold might be pound for pound best fighter in the world. You know, there were people that thought Rockhold might have been capable of beating John Jones. Now, if you've only started watching the UFC in the last few years, that might seem crazy to you, right? Because Rockhold's turned into a bit of a meme. People consider him to be a bum, a fucking expression I hate. But if you look at when USADA first came in 2015, 2016, a lot of the fighters at the time who were considered to be the best fighters in the world were not even UFC level fighters 18 months later. You know, guys like Hendricks, guys like Rockhold, guys like Pettis and countless others saw their careers fall off a cliff. So naturally, now that USADA have gone and there's probably very little performance enhancing drug testing in the UFC compared to what there used to be, it would make sense that we get the opposite in 2024 of what we had in 2016, where if some fighters back in 2016 looked exponentially worse under USADA drug testing, now that there's no USADA drug testing, you'd expect some fighters to look exponentially better, right? It's like yin and yang. You'd expect the opposite to happen. And so, yeah, I'm not going to say I think Duplessis on performance enhancing drugs or anything like that. All I will say is he looked significantly better against Sean Strickland than in any of his other fights ever. And that could be a reason. It could be a nose surgery. It could be a training better, eating better. It could be a variety of things, right? But what I would also say is this year we have seen some very sus performances from guys like Ovin St. Preux putting in one of the best performances of his career against Kennedy and Chuckwood at the age of like 41, 42 years old. I think Jose Aldo put in one of the best performances of his career in his mid-30s against Jonathan Martinez. These are unusual things. Belal Muhammad looked a lot stronger, a lot more physically imposing against Leon Edwards a couple of weeks ago than he ever has done before. If you compare how Belal looked in grappling positions against Leon compared to how he looked against Vicente Luque, it's like looking at two completely different humans. So again, I'm not accusing any specific fighter of anything. I'm certainly not accusing Belal or anyone else of anything. I'm just saying it's something to think about now. It's definitely something to think about. Definitely something to think about, man. Alright. Nice one, Joey. Take care, mate. Nice one, mate. Take care, dude. Alright, boys. And that's a good point as well, Vera, man. That's a good point, right? Obviously, like, I just said, like, Duplessis looked significantly better in this fight than ever before. It may be PEDs are part of the reason, but at the end of the day, you got to keep an open mind, right? More Plates, More Dates has produced a lot of content on Israel Adesanya's potential PED use. And again, I don't accuse anyone of anything. But if Izzy has used performance-enhancing drugs in the past, which More Plates, More Dates, I believe, thinks he has, now there's no USADA drug testing, you'd think it would be a lot easier for Izzy to get back on the juice. So that's worth considering, because Izzy might look better than ever before. Like this weekend, like think about it, right? Izzy at 35 is getting old, but he's not crazy old for a middleweight. Like Jose Aldo in his mid-30s was really, really old for a featherweight when he fought Jonathan Martinez. So if you think about how much performance-enhancing drugs likely helped Jose Aldo improve for that performance, how much better Aldo looked in terms of his energy, his physicality, his explosiveness, his athleticism. Aldo threw the highest volume of strikes against Martinez, and I can recall him throwing in a really long time. He was very aggressive, and usually Aldo slows down in fights, but in round 3 he still looked great. So if PEDs can help a guy like Aldo that much in their mid-30s, imagine what they could do for someone like Izzy if Izzy were to get on PEDs. Could be massive. And when it comes to Du Plessis, we do have another explanation for why his performance was much better against Strickland. Like, his coaches literally said, coming into that fight, that he'd been struggling to breathe in past fights because of damage to his nose, and now he'd had surgery to correct it. They openly said he was going to look a lot better against Strickland, and he did. So we've got an explanation for why Du Plessis looked a lot better in that fight, and it wasn't necessarily PEDs. But where there is smoke, there is fire. Not always. I get accused of a lot of crazy stuff online. So it's not always true, especially with the internet. The internet is wild. The internet's a crazy place. People make up all kinds of shit, right? You go on Twitter and you look at some of the conspiracies, the fake news, some of the stuff the media post. It's all wild. You gotta keep a very open mind on things. But a lot of people that know a lot about performance enhancing drugs think that Izzy at some point did use performance enhancing drugs, and obviously he had the issue with his nipple, the steroid titty. So, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire, and with no PED testing now, maybe Izzy could look like a super mutant this weekend, better than ever. So, you know what? I would say this, man. If you are thinking of betting Du Plessis this weekend, that would definitely be a risk factor that would concern me a little bit, because if educated people in the field have done like a deep dive on Izzy's, you know, appearance, and they're saying he's more than likely on PEDs, like I would take that seriously for sure. Because if Izzy does get on the PEDs, he could look a lot better this weekend. Like, if you think about how much better a 40-year-old OSP looked, imagine how much better Izzy might look. Alright, let's start at this Blachowicz fight. So it starts, let's get it going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Let's go, 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 go. So here we go. So what is kind of cool about this fight, even though it was at light heavyweight, Blachowicz kind of has a similar body type to Du Plessis. He's kind of tanky. Du Plessis' best weapons are his heavy kicks, just like Blachowicz's. And you'd think that Izzy would want to use a similar sort of game plan against Du Plessis as to what he used against Blachowicz, right? Izzy's not going to want to get into any big exchanges because of Du Plessis' power. Izzy's going to want to play the role of Matador, use his length to try and chip away at Du Plessis from a safe distance, which is probably what he's tried to do against Blachowicz here. So this fight will be useful, even though it was a long time ago. So we were saying earlier on that Izzy had a lot of success with leg kicks against Paulo Costa. Oh, there we go, like clockwork. He threw the first one there, first outside leg kick. So it'll be interesting to see how many leg kicks Izzy throws in this fight, because sometimes he throws a lot, sometimes he doesn't. And there's got to be reasons for that. Don't think he threw all that many against Strickland, but I could be wrong. We'll soon find out. So what is quite interesting is you see Izzy likes to measure distance with his lead hand, which is something that I know Sean Strickland does a lot as well. So it'll be interesting to see how Du Plessis gets past that and how he dealt with it against Strickland. I'm also interested to see if Blachowicz gets anywhere near Izzy with his boxing, because Blachowicz is obviously going to be a much more technical striker than Plessis. I'd imagine quite a bit faster than Plessis as well, although we'll get to see that when we watch Plessis versus Strickland. But I'm interested to see how much success Blachowicz can have landing headshots, because so far we're 3 minutes in and Blachowicz hasn't gone near him with a head strike. Because if we think about it, right, there are a lot of similarities between Blachowicz and Plessis. Same body type, kicks-based style of striking, heavy power in the kicks, not the best boxing. So you'd anticipate Izzy would use a similar game plan against Plessis to what he used against Blachowicz. So this fight is a really good one to watch. And Izzy's striking defense just looks amazing, right? Just chipping away at Blachowicz, and anytime Blachowicz comes forward into a range where he could potentially land on Izzy just backs up and just slips just outside of a range where he can be hit. And one of the things that enables him to do that is just dangling that lead hand out there, and anytime Blachowicz looks to get inside that lead hand, Izzy's not interested in engaging or countering. He's just trying to back up and circle away. And we were talking about this in the live betting group on Saturday night when we were watching Yusuf Zalal versus Jano Errands, and then also Yusuf Zalal's teammate Quang Li. And what Zalal and Gutierrez did a really good job of last weekend, which I love to see, and it's quite a rare thing in MMA. It's only something you really see high-level fighters do, and we're seeing it with Izzy here, is where they just, no matter what their opponent does to them, no matter how much pressure they put on them, they don't get dragged into reckless exchanges. We're seeing it from Izzy here. What you notice about Gutierrez and Zalal last weekend is every time Errands and Quang Li blitzed forward and loaded up on big power shots, instead of standing their ground and trying to counter, or instead of trying to meet them head on and engage and win the exchange, both Zalal and Gutierrez would just back up, circle away, and get back into the range where they could use their length to chip away at their less technical opponents from a safer distance. And it's exactly what we're seeing from Izzy here. He's not getting dragged into any big exchanges. He's just using his length to chip away at Blachowicz from a safe distance. That makes it very, very difficult to land anything on him, because with his length he can chip away at you from kickboxing range, and then as soon as you change your body language to come forward and attack him, he's moving out the way so that he's not in a position where you can actually hit him unless you start chasing after him, which is obviously a very risky thing to do, because then you yourself are wide open to counters. Gutierrez and Zalal did a really good job of that last weekend. So if we sync up round 2 now, which starts at 10 minutes. So sync up round 2 for me, guys. Sync up round 2. Sync up round 2. And let's get it going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So Vera is just told me that I'm completely wrong and Blachowicz is out jabbing Izzy. I'm not seeing any of that myself. I'm not really seeing Blachowicz land hardly anything. For me, Izzy is chipping away at Blachowicz, looking very comfortable and outstriking him by a wide margin. How many head strikes does UFC stats say Izzy Blachowicz landed in round 1? Unless I'm completely wrong, he's landing very little here per round. So we're saying 18 of 31, but how many of them are head strikes? Yeah, there you go. Only 3 strikes to the head in round 1. The majority of strikes that Blachowicz is landing is to the body and the legs. But these stats seem way off to me, and this is a thing I notice in live betting as well. So if you guys live bet on the UFC, so often the striking stats are way off. Like when you actually are watching what's landing, the striking stats are like way off. And if you're actually paying attention to what's landing, it can very much differ from the actual recorded significant strikes. Like if we just look at it there, right? Blachowicz has thrown 3 punches, but Izzy slipped all 3 of them. But what you'll quite often find when you pay attention to the stats landed in live betting is that like those 3 strikes can count as strikes landed. So you have to be very, very careful when you pay attention to what is actually landing. For me, I'm not seeing Blachowicz really have very much success with head strikes at all. I could be completely wrong. And don't get me wrong, Izzy isn't having that much success with head strikes either. But Izzy is doing a really good job of using his length to chip away at the legs and the body with his range-finding leg kicks. Like you see that sequence there, right? Blachowicz spams forward with a 5-punch combination. None of those punches landed. Izzy slipped all of them and then circled away. Well, you're quite often is strikes like that do get, or some of them get counted as landed. So Blachowicz looking for an outside trip off a body lock. Doesn't get it. Izzy back up. So what I am noticing in this fight is Izzy's boxing defense looks incredible. Like I say, we're about 8 minutes in and Blachowicz hasn't really landed a clean hard punch yet. Izzy's done a really good job of slipping or blocking or deflecting pretty much everything that Blachowicz has thrown at him, which is interesting to me because you'd think, like even there, slips the left hand, like there you'd think Blachowicz would not only be more technical than du Plessis but faster as well, with a similar sort of stance. But what we are seeing in this fight is Izzy very, very much focused on his boxing defense, and he's not scoring a lot of points himself. But he is doing a very good job of reading Blachowicz. Like you see it there, right? Again, 2 punches slipped. So Izzy doing a good job of using his length. While they stop for this foul, I just want to check Blachowicz's height and reach. So he's 6'2", which is about the same height as du Plessis. And he's got 2 inches longer reach. Alright, interesting. I just wanted to check that because obviously if du Plessis had a much shorter reach than Blachowicz, you'd think Izzy would do a much better job of evading du Plessis' boxing, right? Because if he's doing a pretty good job of evading Blachowicz's power punches, and Blachowicz is faster and more technical than du Plessis, then if Blachowicz had a big reach advantage as well, you'd think Izzy would find it even easier to prevent du Plessis from having success with his boxing. Again, Izzy's boxing defense looking great. Blachowicz really struggling to get near him here. Nice left hand from Blachowicz. Alright, let's get round 3 synced up and ready to go. So round 3 starts in 16 minutes and 35 seconds. That's 16 minutes 35 seconds. Let's get going. 16 minutes 35 seconds. No, Vera, I'm not saying that Izzy is winning rounds. What I'm saying is defensively he looks amazing. Like Blachowicz can't really get near him with head strikes, but because Izzy is so focused on defense and because he's so worried about Blachowicz's power, he's not scoring any points because he's not landing a whole lot. I really think these rounds are very close, man. They're literally just exchanging body and leg kicks. Neither are really landing any meaningful head strikes. These rounds are razor close for me. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm definitely admiring Izzy's striking defense, but at the same time, he's not really landing anything. Do you know what I mean? So it's great that he's not getting hit, but he's not scoring points either, which isn't great because, you know, you never want to put your money in a situation where your fighter's not going to do a whole lot in a round. Like, I hate betting fighters that are quite passive, tentative, don't put their stamp on rounds. Like, you guys know me, when I do my breakdown videos, I always talk about, you know, fighters that put their stamp on rounds or don't put their stamp on rounds. I feel like Izzy's one of those guys that sometimes doesn't put his stamp on rounds, and he relies a lot on judging. Like, he kind of did it in the Yoel Romero fight. We're seeing him do it here against Jan. He definitely did it against Sean Strickland. So yeah, I do think defensively Izzy looks amazing here, but he's not scoring many points. So if we get this third round going now, let's start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So yeah, Izzy's striking defense has looked amazing. Blachowicz has barely landed a clean hard punch. But that does have me optimistic for Izzy's chances of beating du Plessis, because you'd think Blachowicz would be much more skilled on the feet than du Plessis, who's a little bit wild, a little bit reckless. That was a nice left hand from Blachowicz. Do you know what I also find interesting about this fight? Okay, so Blachowicz with the takedown here. What I find interesting about this fight is, obviously this was a bad performance from Adesanya, and after the fight, I remember an interview where he got asked about why he basically got taken down and held down so easily, and his answer was that his legs felt very tired, which is super interesting because even though he has thrown a lot of kicks, I do feel like it has been quite a slow-paced fight. He has thrown a lot of kicks, to be fair. It's just a weird thing to say, like some of you don't hear fighters say a whole lot. Now we're seeing Izzy starting to score some points. Does look like Blachowicz is slowing a bit here. Arms are getting lower, big deep breaths. I think Izzy is sensing that. And now Izzy is the aggressor, trying to capitalise on Blachowicz slowing a bit and trying to take a bit of a break here. Nice body kick from Izzy. Yeah, Izzy's really taking the fight to Jan now. So it is important to, you know, observe Izzy in these positions, because du Plessis, even though to be fair, du Plessis shoots single legs and double legs out in the middle of the octagon, we haven't seen du Plessis work for too many takedowns up against the cage with like chain wrestling. It's interesting to see how Izzy uses the cage, what his balance is like when defending takedowns in that position. He may find himself in that position against du Plessis, but du Plessis usually shoots takedowns from out in the middle of the octagon instead of driving guys into the cage and working for takedowns up against the cage. I mean, he does work for takedowns if the fight's up against the cage, but he likes to kind of catch people flat-footed in the middle of the octagon with those double leg entries. So this is a good round for Izzy. This is probably the easiest round of the fight to score. Izzy has outstruck Blachowicz by a big margin in this round. Sitting down harder on his punches. I think it's just a situation where Blachowicz has slowed in this round and Izzy's taken advantage of it. You can see Blachowicz's mouth is wide open. What is interesting to me though is as soon as Blachowicz has shown signs of slowing here, Izzy's really picked the pace up on him. So it'll be interesting to see the du Plessis versus Strickland fight. Because from memory, I think there were situations where du Plessis started to look tired, but Strickland didn't really make him pay for it. He kind of let him off the hook. And it probably comes from confidence, right? Now that Blachowicz is more tired, Izzy's probably not as worried about being knocked out. You know, Blachowicz's arms look heavy, so Izzy's probably thinking, I can afford to be a bit more aggressive now, because with how tired Blachowicz is, he might not have the power in his hands to hurt me. I can already see my lean on this fight is probably going to be Izzy, unless like I'm completely shocked by what I see in the du Plessis versus Strickland fight. But Blachowicz, and there's so many similarities between Blachowicz and du Plessis' style of striking, but Blachowicz is a more technical striker. That with how well Izzy has done against Blachowicz on the feet, I think he's going to be capable of causing du Plessis big problems. But we'll see how it goes. Nice right hand from Izzy. Alright. Now let's get into round 4. So round 4 starts in 22 minutes and 45 seconds. That's 22 minutes 45 seconds. 22 minutes 45 seconds. Pepino, so Izzy is getting hit more in round 3 than he did in rounds 1 and 2. But that's because he's engaging more, right? So in rounds 1 and 2, Izzy didn't get hit much. But he also didn't land much either because he wasn't engaging. In the 3rd round, when Blachowicz starts to slow, Izzy starts to be the aggressor. He starts to attack him more. So when you attack your opponent more, naturally you're going to be getting into more exchanges, so you are going to get hit more. But I think Izzy showed Blachowicz a lot of respect in rounds 1 and 2 because he feared his power. And then when Blachowicz slowed a bit and Izzy found his range into that 3rd round, that's when Izzy didn't mind exchanging and mixing it up more, because I think by that point in the fight he felt Blachowicz couldn't really knock him out or hurt him anymore because he was too tired. So naturally Izzy is going to get hit more in round 3 than he did in rounds 1 and 2, just because you can't not get hit more if you attack more. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, if you jump in the pool, you're going to get wet. So Pep is saying, I don't think du Plessis will be able to check kicks as well as Jan and Strickland. That's a good point, man. I mean, you wouldn't think he'd be able to read anything as well, would you? Know what I mean? Because if you think about it, like, Jan and Strickland are so much more experienced and technical than du Plessis. Elvis is saying 1.7 on Izzy. Easy bet, mate. Do you know what? I actually think his odds are better than that. Last time I checked. Yeah, they are. And they're improving as well. If we look at the odds movement chart, they're getting better. Du Plessis is one of these guys that people think is very, very good, right? There are certain guys that for some reason people love. But I think sometimes they don't always, like the wider MMA community doesn't always do a particularly good job of assessing the reality of a fighter's capabilities. I do feel that's been the case with du Plessis, because, like, I don't want to keep digging up the past, right? But I remember when I made my YouTube breakdown video for the fight between Strickland and du Plessis, and I said I was betting Strickland. And now when we go back and watch how du Plessis looked against Darren Till, Strickland would have been a no-brainer, right? But the amount of people that were like, it's a terrible bet, you're a fraud, you're clueless, you're dumb, you're stupid, du Plessis is going to win easily, du Plessis a lock, all this type of stuff. And then obviously when Strickland does lose, I get hit immediately after the fight with all the I told you so's. People like, I told you it was an easy fight for du Plessis, Strickland's a bum, you suck, you're a fraud, you're clueless, all this stuff, right? I do feel like a massive percentage of the MMA community are kind of blind to Plessis' weaknesses, and you do get fighters come along like this every once in a while. Eventually they tend to get exposed, and then everyone's like, oh, okay, he wasn't as good as I thought he was. Sometimes it takes a while. You know what I mean? Sometimes it takes a while. Like when you have Joe Pyfer versus Jack Hermanson, and every single person in the fucking universe puts Joe Pyfer into their parlays without looking at the big picture, you know? And then just focusing on what is true. So at the moment I'm liking Izzy, but obviously we need to see that Strickland fight, man, and see what is true. See what is true, man. So let's get into round 4 now. This is where we start to see Izzy on the ground, which is what we really need. So this starts in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Let's go, 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 go. So very aggressive Izzy in round 3. And he's absolutely cruising at the moment. So because of that, Yan drives him into the cage. Starts working for a takedown. Nice takedown defense from Izzy though. Oh, not anymore. He was fighting for the underhook on the right side, but he let it go, just relying on that overhook on the right side. His right side. But he's out of there. Very nice. Nice stiff right hand there from Blachowicz. Almost like a jab, but with his power hand. There's a stiff right hand. Now you can see Izzy is engaging in boxing range more, so just like Pepino said, he is getting hit a lot more. Izzy's striking defense not looking as good now. And that's because he's trying to take Blachowicz out, he's trying to score points. But you can see Izzy is way more confident, to the extent that in some of these exchanges their lead legs are practically touching, and that's what Izzy wants to do, right? Look at the combinations there. You can see, look how much harder Izzy is sitting down on his shots now compared to in rounds 1 and 2, where he was just kind of staying light on his feet and chipping away at Blachowicz from a safe distance. But Izzy gives up a cheap takedown there, and Blachowicz moves into half guard. And you've got to think as well, right? Plessis is obviously very confident. He's got a big ego. He's an intelligent guy. You know, if you're Plessis, as much as you do believe you're the best fighter in the world, and, you know, in his heart he probably believes, rightly or wrongly, he can outstrike Adesanya. If you Plessis and you're doing your homework on Izzy, like, this is the one fight where a massive weakness in Izzy's skill set got exposed, right? Do you really want to go out there and, you know, try and win a 25-minute decision against a very, very technical kickboxer when the technical kickboxer might have home advantage as well? Or do you want to make life a lot easier for yourself and follow Blachowicz's blueprint and grapple? Because even though Izzy's not the easiest to take down, he looks so weak off his back here. And to be fair, like, guys with Izzy's body type do tend to be really weak off their back. Like, if you think about just some examples, right? So generally speaking, when you see guys with Izzy's body type, skinny legs, they do tend to be very weak in the body, which is why Jon Jones is probably the greatest fighter of all time, because he's a bit of a unicorn in that Jon Jones has got that lean, lanky, skinny frame, skinny legs, but Jones is practically impossible to take down and hold down. But if you think of other guys with this body type, Jalen Turner, Curtis Melender, Chidi Njokuani, guys with this body type are typically extremely weak off their back, and we really see it with Izzy. So it's not a massive surprise here to see Izzy looking totally helpless off his back. Because let's be honest, Blachowicz is like at this point, you know, a 38-year-old Polish kickboxer. You know, he shouldn't be. You know, yes, it's, you know, Izzy's a middleweight. They were fighting a light heavyweight, whatever. But Blachowicz isn't from fucking Dagestan. His top game, his ground game's not that good. Should he really be able to hold Izzy down this easily? For me, this is red flag city. Especially because so many guys with Izzy's body type are this weak off their back also. Track meet. The camera's malfunctioning, probably overheating. It's hot in the UK at the moment. So yeah, sync up round 5 for me now, guys. Izzy looking very weak off his back. So straight away, no matter how much you like Izzy in this fight, that is a red flag. Because if Plessis gets on top of him, we know Izzy's likely going to be in a lot of trouble. So sync up round 5 for me now, guys. Sync up round 5. Sync up round 5. Alright, let's get it going. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Let's go, let's go. So I think this 5th round plays out in pretty much the same way as the 4th. Do you know something else for us to think about as well? Just at the beginning of this round, we're seeing Blachowicz land some clean, hard shots. Like, Blachowicz is having more success in the first 30 seconds of this 5th round with his boxing than he's had in the entire fight. And that can come from when you threaten with the takedown. So when you threaten with the risk of a takedown, obviously it opens up opportunities for you in striking. Because if you think about this fight, right? Up until round 4, Izzy didn't even have to think about defending takedowns. All he had to focus on was striking and reading Blachowicz's strikes. So every time Blachowicz came forward, Izzy was just focused on reading Blachowicz's striking-based attacks. But as soon as Blachowicz starts to threaten with the takedown, now anytime Blachowicz comes forward, Izzy's got to be thinking about defending himself from strikes and potential takedown entries, which is why you're seeing Blachowicz have a lot more success with his boxing in this round. Blachowicz has probably landed more clean, hard punches in this round, and we're only a minute and a half in than the previous 4 rounds combined. And that's probably because now Blachowicz has got the element of surprise on his side. Izzy knows Blachowicz is trying to take him down. He's got to be worried about that, but he's also got to be worried about the boxing as well. And this is where Plessis can use grappling to close the skill gap on the feet, right? Because most of us are going to agree that Izzy, from a technical point of view, has a huge advantage when it comes to striking. But if Plessis threatens with some takedowns early on, even if he doesn't get the takedowns, at least he's going to have Izzy thinking about the takedowns, which will open up opportunities for him striking. So midway through the 5th round, it's a great round for Blachowicz. Double leg terrible takedown defense from Izzy, practically leapt to the ground. What was really concerning in round 4 is that Izzy made absolutely no attempt to get back up to his feet at all. And if we look at this fight, right, some people by this point in the fight had it 2 rounds apiece. You know, the light heavyweight title could have depended on this 2.5 minutes, right? So you'd want Izzy to try extremely hard to work his way back up to his feet, because the light heavyweight title might depend on it. But instead, he's kind of just chilling in close guard. You know, he's not trying to scoot his butt over to the cage to try and wall walk. He's not trying to push off the hips of Blachowicz with his feet. He is starting to now on the left side, but he's not really committing to it. Look, he's gone back to full guard. Now he's scooting his butt over to the cage. But you need to think faster than this, right? There's only 2.5 minutes left to go in the round. The light heavyweight title could depend on this. And Izzy's not really showing much urgency to work his way back up to his feet. Super disappointing. Very, very disappointing. Because we know Du Plessis is probably a big, strong guy with a heavy top game. We haven't seen a lot of Du Plessis' top game, to be fair. He obviously caught Whittaker in a bad position towards the end of the first round of his fight, where he was obviously on top of Whittaker, inflicting a lot of damage. But outside of that, we haven't seen tons of Du Plessis in top position. That's going to be the end of that fight. That's a good that's a good point as well, Pepino, man. Pepino just saying Izzy did look a bit tired in the 5th round after all that grappling in the 4th. So if Du Plessis does make him grapple, not only could it close a skill gap, but maybe it tires Izzy out a good amount as well. So Fat Disha is saying that the Izzy performance against Strickland was a weird one. His theory is that he wasn't cycling for the Strickland fight and had a hormone dump. He was out of his contract during his time off and had jumped back. It's a good point. Good point, Disha, man. We were talking about PEDs earlier on in the stream and saying how now there's no USADA drug testing, we could see the best version of Izzy ever this weekend. He might be juicing his absolute dick off. Alright, so Izzy terrible off his back, and that's got to be a big risk factor if you're betting him this weekend. So what fight should we watch next? We talked a lot about Du Plessis' fight against Strickland. So let's watch that. Because we've seen the worst of Du Plessis against Till. Now let's see the best of him. So this is the link for Fight Pass. I'll grab you guys the link for ESPN Plus right now. Also, guys, right? I've got this in the background, which is my website. Ideally, what I would like is for me to be able to obviously put the fights on here, and then we could research the fights together. We could actually watch them instead of having to do it fight companion style. But it's really shit, like just having this here for the pretty much the whole stream. So if you guys have got any ideas on what I can put in the background of these streams, let me know. Because I literally for a while I would have like the Bitcoin charts up. I would have like the Bitcoin charts up, but obviously a lot of people are not interested in Bitcoin, so just kind of have my website up as a backdrop. If you can think of anything I can have on these streams as a backdrop, man, let me know. Obviously we can't put the fights up because of copyright issues. No, I didn't know Bruno Silva got popped, man. That's crazy, Vera, man. Oh, I gotta get you guys the ESPN Plus link as well. Here we go. There we go. Alright, so sync up the first round of this for me, guys. Looking forward to watching this fight. Obviously, I lost a lot of money on Strickland in this fight, so I'm looking forward to reliving it. Although, to be fair, I did score the fight for Strickland. Let's see how the MMA media had it. Can't remember how the media scored it. I did score it at the time 3 rounds to 2 for Strickland, so it'll be interesting to see if I score it the same watching it back. Because I had a pre-fight bet on Strickland and I also live bet him as well, so it was like a double whammy. Oh, it was 50-50 actually, it was pretty split. Fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. Fair enough, slightly more scoring it for Du Plessis. We'll get rid of that, so doesn't lag the stream out. We might need this, so we'll keep this around for a little bit longer. Go back to that. So Connor, man. So I'll just to answer very quick on what I think is going to happen with Bitcoin. So if we just bring this chart up here. So basically every few years, every 4 years, there's a Bitcoin halving where the supply of Bitcoin will gradually get reduced because less Bitcoins will be given as rewards to miners, which means less new Bitcoin is going into circulation. So the 11th of May, April 19th, right? 11th of May 2020. Right, 11th of May 2020 would be about there, and the 19th of April 2024 would be about, what was it, the 9th, yeah, April 19th would be about there. So if we zoom out, let's go to the weekly. So the orange vertical lines represent the halving dates for Bitcoin. So you can see in the halving back in 2016, which was here, if we zoom in, after the Bitcoin halving, Bitcoin went on a massive bull run, massive gains. I think it was like a 3,000% gain from approximately here. Yeah, almost a 3,000% gain off the lows from the halving date, which is about here, July 9th. So massive bull run after the halving. The next one, May 11th, which is here. Again, massive bull run after the halving. And we've just had a halving 4 months ago, April 15th. Now this halving was different to the previous ones because, as you can see, Bitcoin went on a big run leading into this halving date and has dipped ever since. But if you look at the previous halvings and we zoom right in on them, you can see, and it doesn't, it's very subtle because Bitcoin's gone up so much. This area of price action here looks like a bit of a nothing burger because in the big picture, with how much the price of Bitcoin's gone up, this price action in here doesn't look very much, right? If we zoom right in, we get right in, right? So this was about the halving date, 11th of May. Off these lows, see the wick here? Off these lows, Bitcoin still went up like 160%, right? So even though this doesn't look like much in the big picture, at the time, Bitcoin more than doubled in value. And then if we go back to here, for the halving cycle back in 2016, same thing, right? From the lows here, massive run up, 300% run up into the halving. And then immediately after the halving, we get this dip. I mean, look at this. From the date of the halving, Bitcoin wicks down 32% from being up 300% almost, right? But you see the same pattern repeating. You see the same pattern repeating, right? Where you have big run up leading into the halving. Then you get the sell-off. And then a massive bull run, right? And again, this price action doesn't mean much because after this halving date and after this dip, Bitcoin runs up 3,000%. So this price action doesn't do a whole lot in the big picture. When you look at it, it's a bit of a nothing burger. But at the time, if you're holding Bitcoin at the time, it ain't going to feel nice when your Bitcoin is crashing 30%. That ain't going to feel nice, right? So even though it looks a bit of a nothing burger now, when you zoom out, at the time, that's fucking pain for holders. And if we go to the halving date in 2021, exactly the same shit, right? Big run up. Bitcoin's up 160%. And then into this dip. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not as big of a dip as, you know, the 30% dip that we just marked out. But from the high to the low, still down about 13%. But you see, look, this big run up, little pullback, and then boom, off to the races, right? How much did it go up? About 600%. So now we're in a situation where we've kind of got the same thing happen, right? Off the lows, big run up into the halving, 369% gain in the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, and now Bitcoin's pulling back again. So if history tells us anything, it's that what is most likely to happen from what's happened, you know, when we've had the previous two halvings is we've just had the pump over the last 2 years. Now we're going to cool off and then boom, exponential gains. Next halving, you get the big run up, then you get the cool off, boom, exponential gains. Now you look, we get the halving, April 15th, 4 months ago. We get the cool off. What do we get next? Do we get the boom exponential gains? What do we think? At the end of the day, it's like sports betting, right? No one knows what the future holds. All we can do is make the best decision possible with the information we've got available. You know, that's literally all we can do in life. It's all about probabilities. But if you look at what Bitcoin is doing here, it's kind of doing the same thing that it did in the previous two halvings. Yes, the structure of the chart is different. Yes, the dips are different percentages and they look slightly different. But, you know, and let's go back even further. Is it even on the chart? November, it might not, the chart might not go back that far. I don't think it does. Does it go back to 2012? I don't think it does. No. Does it? Does it? November 28th. Oh, it does. So let's have a look at this then. So November 28th was the first halving. November 28th. So we get the orange line out. It's going to be about there. Kind of similar. Kind of similar. Kind of similar. Again, it's behaving slightly differently on each halving, but fundamentally the same pattern, where you get this big run up. In this instance, it's like a 500% gain. Then you get the cool off, and then boom, whoosh, exponential gains. So we've seen the same pattern in the last 3 halvings, right? Big run up, cool off, exponential bull market, massive gains. In the last 3, 1, 2, 3. So if I were a betting man, I would bet Bitcoin is about to go on a massive bull run relatively soon. Sometime like soon, you'd think. Sometime in the next 6 months, if the past halvings are anything to go by. And it's like sports betting, right? We don't know for sure. Like, look, we've literally just watched Darren Till versus Dricus du Plessis, and we said, look, we lost a lot of money betting Sean Strickland, but he was a pretty good bet. If that version of du Plessis showed up, Strickland probably smokes him, right? Don't know for sure what Bitcoin's going to do, but when you look at the past, what's happened in previous halvings, we could be pretty sure. I'm not pretty sure, but there's a pretty good probability Bitcoin's going to explode, I would imagine. But, do you know what else I find really interesting? If we look at gold, so we bring up the gold chart. Where are we? No, sorry, not. They're gold miners. I need to look at commodities. Here we go. So if we bring up commodities, right, I find this chart super interesting. And I've done this previously, right? Done this previously. So I'll Google this stuff just so you can verify all the information I'm showing you so there's no skeptical people. So when did the Bitcoin ETF launch? So the first Bitcoin ETF launched in January 2010, right? So if we go to Bitcoin very quickly, what was it? January the 10th, right? We draw a little orange circle on January the 10th, 2024, around about here. Yeah, it's going to be in there somewhere, right? So in there somewhere is when the first ever Bitcoin ETF got launched. And then boom, price of Bitcoin explodes off the back of the ETF launching. But we're still very early into the Bitcoin ETF life cycle, right? It's only existed for 8 months. But what happened when gold had its first ETF? And if you don't know what an ETF is, an ETF just basically stands for Exchange Traded Fund. And what it basically means is you can buy ownership of a commodity like gold or Bitcoin through a stockbroker account, through an exchange, without having to physically own it or physically hold it. So, for example, if you wanted to own gold in your 401k, your pension, your stock portfolio, whatever, instead of you going out and having to physically buy gold and hold gold, you could buy a gold ETF, an exchange traded fund, which basically means that you would be exposed to the price of gold. You could buy and hold, you know, an equivalent amount of gold in just like an electronic ETF, and then you can invest in gold without having to physically buy it. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin. You can invest in Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin, without actually physically having to have the keys and the wallet. Whoever you're buying it from, whichever exchange or ETF provider, they will hold the Bitcoin for you. So they will manage all the risk on that side. You'll just have like an electronic note that you own it. So what an exchange traded fund is, ETF. So the first gold ETF launched on November 18th, 2004. So this is really interesting. So here's the Bitcoin ETF. And if we go all the way back to 2004, you can see I've already drawn it out. So if we zoom all the way in, all the way back to 2004, November 2004 would be about here, somewhere in there. And look at what the price of gold has done since the ETF launched. Look at this. It went on like a it went on like a 7 to 8 year bull market run. It literally just went up for 7 or 8 years straight. Do you know what's very, very interesting about this? If you look at the price of gold before the ETF launched, kind of just went sideways. Look at the difference in price action. So this is before the ETF. And then look, as soon as the ETF launches, boom, look at what price does. So look, at the end of the day, there's no way to know what the future holds. All we can do in sports betting, investing, life, is try and make the best decision possible with the information we've got available, right? When we can see that every previous halving cycle in Bitcoin's history has produced massive bull runs, and when we see gold go on a massive bull run, when the first ETF was launched back in November 2004, the probabilities are overwhelmingly stacked in favor of Bitcoin going on a huge bull run sometime in the next 6 months to a year. But it might not. But I do think betting on it to go on a massive bull run does give us a pretty good risk to reward ratio. Also, don't get confused. This says Bitcoin crypto holds. I don't hold all this stuff. That's just kind of, I used to use this section of TradingView to track my holds, but I don't do it like that anymore. I do it a different way, so I just haven't renamed this. So we'll just change. We'll actually just change that now because people on stream will probably find it confusing. They'll be like, "Oh, Allsopp holds all this shit." I don't actually hold much of this anymore. Just so that's not confusing for you. So sorry to go off on a tangent, man. We'll get back to the cage fighting now, because I know most of you probably don't give a fuck about Bitcoin anyway. So yeah, let's get back to it, man. Let's get back to it. So, alright, let's go. Let's get into this next fight. So this is Strickland versus Plessis. And let's just catch up on the chat very quickly. Nice one, J-Matt, mate. Really appreciate it, man. Do you know what, Google? I think we need to watch the... once we watch the Strickland and Plessis fight, we'll have a pretty good idea, man. Hey, what's up, Beer Belly? Hope you're doing good, mate. Oh, thanks a lot for the kind words, Beer Belly, mate. Hey, what's up, Mo Sharif? What's up, mate? Well, the thing is, Mo, that's the beauty of these live streams, right? Like, if you think about it, I make like between 3 to 5 hours of video footage for breakdown videos every week. So it's nice to do these live streams from time to time where I get to talk about different things. Otherwise, all I ever get to talk about to you guys is UFC, which gets a bit boring. You know what I mean? Like, I talk so much about UFC. Like, I talk about UFC on video for like 3 to 5 hours a week. So it is nice on these live streams just to talk about different stuff from time to time. Yeah, it's brutal stuff like that, J-Man. Brutal, man. Nice one, Connor, mate. Alright, let's get into this next fight, man. So, Plessis versus Strickland. Let's get it going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Let's go, let's go. So, after the Blachowicz versus Izzy fight, I think we're going to have a pretty good idea whether either of these guys is going to be worth a bet by the time we finish watching this matchup. Straight away, what I'm noticing, just literally at first glance, we were saying that Blachowicz and Plessis have a lot of similarities between their stance and their style. But Plessis looks quite a lot smaller than Blachowicz, which I know sounds obvious, because Blachowicz is a light heavyweight and Plessis is a middleweight. But Blachowicz definitely a lot bigger than Plessis, even though there's only like a 2-inch difference in height. You can see, or 1-inch difference in height. But you can see Blachowicz just looks the much bigger, more physically imposing guy in the octagon. So we know that Izzy likes to throw a lot of kicks early in fights. Doesn't like to engage with his boxing too much early. Guys, are any of you from Australia as well? Do you think Izzy will have the crowd behind him? I'm not too sure how that works with him being from New Zealand. Will Izzy have the crowd behind him in Australia, or will no one really care? Because like in the UK, when they do events in England, obviously the crowd still support Welsh and Scottish fighters. But I wasn't sure how much the Aussie fans will really care about someone from New Zealand. So what we are seeing at the moment is Plessis really struggling to get inside the length of Strickland, and one thing we know Izzy likes to do is keep his opponents outside the range where he can be hit by measuring distance with our lead hand. And at the moment, I know we're only 2 minutes in and he hasn't found his range yet, but at the moment Plessis can't get near Strickland. Strickland is easily chipping away at him here. So we're seeing a lot of stance switches from Plessis. but he is also quite flat-footed and heavy on his lead leg. Obviously, he's switching stances a lot. But when he's settled in a stance, he is very heavy on the lead leg. And we know Izzy's got really, really nice leg kicks. I mean, Duplessis got nice leg kicks as well, but it's going to be a lot harder for Duplessis to land him on Izzy because of how well Izzy manages distance and how well he moves. You can again, like, I know a lot of people are passionate about Duplessis and his skill set, but you can just kind of see here, Duplessis' boxing is really low level, man. Beautiful double leg entry though. Duplessis does a great job of getting his hands connected around Strickland's legs and gets the takedown easily. And with how bad Izzy's takedown defense looked against Blachowicz, if Duplessis starts shooting takedowns like that on Izzy, he's going to get them takedowns easily. Now, obviously, Strickland easily popped back up to his feet, but we know Izzy's very, very weak off his back based on the Blachowicz fight. So, really nice takedown entry there from Duplessis. So, yeah, like the two things that have really stood out to me in this round, Duplessis' boxing is very, very low level. He's very sloppy. He's also very flat-footed, even though he does switch stances a lot. But his takedown entry on Strickland was very, very nice. And with how weak Izzy looked off his back against Blachowicz, that could be a real problem for Izzy. But Duplessis' boxing is ass, to be fair. His kicks are heavy, but his boxing's dreadful. Like how you just see him step in with that overhand right. Like you can already see, once Izzy starts to find his range and get a little bit more aggressive like he did against Blachowicz, you could really see Izzy lighten him up with his boxing. So, yeah, Duplessis' boxing pretty bad, man. Pretty bad. So, if we sync up round 2 now, so round 2 starts at 10 minutes exactly. So, sync it up for me on Fight Pass. It starts at 10 minutes. Sync it up, guys. It starts at 10 minutes. 10 minutes, man. Sync it up for 10 minutes. So Vera is saying that the crowd was behind Strickland and booing Izzy when they were in Australia. Okay, nice one. So Nick is saying that he's from New Zealand and the crowd are definitely behind Izzy. Nice one, Nick, mate. Alright, now let's get the next round going. Sync it up. Get it going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So remember in round 2 of the Darren Till fight, towards the end of round 1, Duplessis' mouth was wide open, and then in round 2 against Till, Duplessis was looking badly gassed. So it'll be interesting to see how Duplessis looks in this round. Like, his mouth isn't open, and we were saying that obviously the nose surgery is likely meant Duplessis can breathe much easier through the nose now. So his gas tank is obviously going to be a lot better in this fight. But it will be interesting. Like this second round, like he looked awful against Darren Till in round 2. So it will be interesting to see how this second round plays out. Yeah, what I would just say about Duplessis, man, like I said earlier in the stream, Duplessis is one of these guys who, for whatever reason, a big percentage of the MMA community thinks he's like really, 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 really good. And I'm not saying he can't beat Izzy this weekend. All I'm saying is, Like, the cold hard facts about Dricus du Plessis, when you look at the footage of him, is that his boxing is absolutely terrible. He's so low level. Like, he just kind of steps in with arm punches. Like, he's so sloppy. So bad, man. Very, very bad. Like, from all the footage we've seen so far, the way I see this fight is, if it stays standing, I just see Izzy putting on a clinic. Like, don't get me wrong, the early rounds when Izzy's still finding his range may be close. But I think as soon as Izzy's found his range, he'll just start chipping. Like, what the fuck is that spinning attack that du Plessis just thought about throwing there, right? Once Izzy finds his range, he's just going to start to take du Plessis apart. Du Plessis is just too low level on the feet to cause Izzy problems. Like, I'm not saying du Plessis can't catch Izzy with a big shot and knock him out. I'm not saying Izzy could not have another off night like he did against Strickland and barely throw anything and get outpointed because he didn't try. That's MMA, right? That can happen. But if both these guys show up and perform to their full potential, I'd even go as far as saying du Plessis has no chance of outstriking Izzy. Like, no chance. But obviously Izzy is very, very weak off his back. So if du Plessis were to come into this fight with a grappling heavy game plan and grapple hard, Izzy's the kind of guy that if you take him down and put him on his back, he will literally just lie there doing absolutely nothing. And so because of that, Izzy is a tough guy to trust. But in a stand-up fight, Izzy is in a different universe to this guy. Like a different universe. Like, he's very, very low level, man. Like, he kind of just wades forward in straight lines, throwing big arm punches. Like, he's a tough fucker, don't get me wrong. But he's nowhere near Izzy's level. So, nice single leg entry there. And this is the problem, right? It's difficult for him to hold Strickland down, because Strickland's very good at popping back up to his feet. But with how weak Izzy looked off his back against Blachowicz, this is really all du Plessis might need to do in order to win. Just hit the takedowns, get in the top position. Izzy's not going to make any effort to get back up to his feet. And it'll be an easy night's work for du Plessis. Just lay and pray. But his striking is shocking, man. It is really bad. Absolutely shocking. Alright, let's get the third round going. Sync up round 3 for me. So round 3 starts at 16 minutes and 8 seconds. That's 16 minutes and 8 seconds. Sync it up for me, guys. 16 minutes and 8 seconds. $16 minutes and 8 seconds. Alright. Let's get this next one going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So what I will say is, obviously du Plessis' gas tank significantly better here than it was against Till. Like, by this point in the Till fight, he'd obviously gassed pretty bad. Whereas he's still moving all right here. Still, you know, decent hand speed. Hasn't declined too much from the first round. So you can see that du Plessis' cardio's improved for sure. Big head kick. Guys, what do you think's going on with Izzy, man, right? After he performed really bad against Strickland, Do you trust him to show up this weekend? What do you think? I just think if Izzy shows up, he fucking smokes this guy. But if he shows up like he did against Strickland, then I think Duplessis' will to win will be enough to get Duplessis the win. Because if Izzy was that passive, that tentative, that accepting of a loss in a stand-up fight, imagine how accepting of being in bad positions he's going to be if Duplessis puts him on his back. He didn't really make any effort to outstrike Strickland, so he's not, you know, he's not going to make any effort to work his way back up to his feet if he gets taken down. But Duplessis' striking is shockingly bad. Like, really, really bad. To the point where it's kind of incredible how he beat Strickland. But his cardio does look a lot better than it did in the past. But the thing is, right, even though Duplessis is a very low-level striker, we've seen Izzy like very passive, right, and struggle to put his stamp on rounds against a lot of guys, against Joe Romero, against Jan Blachowicz, the first Pereira fight, against Strickland. So it is becoming a bit of a theme with Izzy where he doesn't really let his hands go. Like here, even though Duplessis is very sloppy, still throwing a high volume of strikes, still outworking Strickland. Might not look pretty doing it, it's not that technical, but at least he's trying. Which is more than what can be said for Izzy in a lot of his fights, you know? Got a very nice football match coming up later on. The live bet, boys. Burnley versus Luton Town. Anyone watching Burnley versus Luton later? So what we can say is obviously we're almost in the fourth round now, and Duplessis hasn't really slowed down much. His cardio's looking alright. Like, naturally you're going to slow his fights we're on, but he's nowhere near as tired as he was against Brunson or Till. He looks alright here. Alright, let's get into round 4. Let's do it. Let's get into round 4. So round 4 starts at 22 minutes and 17 seconds. That's 22 minutes and 17 seconds. Sync it up, guys. Sync it up. Sync it up. I'm just catching up on comments, guys. Vera is just mentioning again, like a few people, that Izzy's probably on the good PEDs this time. So Blacksmith Bets is saying that basically, right, I'm gonna say what Blacksmith Bets is saying, but in a different way. Because I know what he's saying, I'm just gonna add a little bit onto it. So what Blacksmith... God, my brain's not working today. I can't get my damn words out. Sorry, mate. What Blacksmith Bets is saying is basically... Izzy took a lot of shit for his performance against Strickland. And there's obviously a lot of bad blood between him and Plessis. It's like personal, right? The whole who's more African than the other, right? And then on top of that, Izzy's been out for a long time, almost a year. So, going into the Strickland fight, or after the Strickland fight, he was talking about being burned out and just like not in a good space mentally, all that kind of stuff. But he's had a year to kind of refresh now, get his head back in the game. So with all the bad blood and the embarrassment from how bad he looked against Strickland, what Blacksmith Bets is saying is pretty likely Izzy will be back to his best against Plessis. I think that's what Blacksmith is saying. Connor's saying, I think Izzy will show up. I think he was off cycle against Strickland. Pep is saying that because it's personal, thinks he'll be very motivated. Blacksmith is saying if Plessis uses pressure, he'll have a much better chance. Because Izzy will need the cracking coming in. Yeah, which to be fair, Izzy doesn't really do, right? The only time I can recall Izzy proper dinging someone with a counter was the first Whittaker fight. But outside of that, he usually just backs up and circles away. Oh, my back. Ugh. Taking your top knot is just talking a little bit about what MMA Guru often talks about, with a lot of the time the fighter who the promotion wants to win ends up taking a decision, and you'd think the UFC would want Izzy to win more than Plessis. You've always got to think about that, man. It is a bit of a trend. Yeah, Pepino is saying that Izzy might need to knock Plessis out in order to win. I think he's alluding to that being because Izzy does struggle to put his stamp on rounds, whereas we can see in the Strickland fight, Plessis is like flat out high output, high work rate. Jay's saying Izzy's become lazy. So Gunnar is bringing up a really good point, which I have been thinking about actually. Gunnar is just saying that he doesn't think Plessis' cardio is better in this fight than his previous fights, but he just thinks Plessis gets tired quickly when he grapples. That's a really good point, man. Alright, let's get into the next round. So this is going to be round, I think, 4. So let's get it going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Let's go, go, go. I have just been impressed by like how well Plessis' gas tank has held up, considering like the volume he's thrown. Like, I know he's missed a lot, but he has thrown a really high volume of strikes, which you wouldn't expect from how he looked against Till and Brunson. Like, it is kind of shocking. Do you know what part of me is thinking as well? Do you know, like when you watch Bilal Muhammad versus Vicente Luque, and he just doesn't have the physicality to hold Luque down? Like, he was taking Luque down easily, but then because Bilal didn't have that physicality to his grappling, Luque was just standing back up anytime he tried. I'm just looking at Duplessis and thinking to myself, if Duplessis gets on the secret juice and just grapples his absolute dick off for 25 minutes, with how weak Izzy looked off his back against Blachowicz, it could be a really easy fight for Duplessis. Like, you know how Bilal Muhammad doesn't usually grapple tons? Like, what Bilal Muhammad usually does, and we were talking about this in the lead up to the Edwards fight, is what Bilal Muhammad usually does is he usually spends like the first 2.5-3 minutes of every round striking. If he doesn't respect his opponent and he has an advantage striking, he'll be the aggressor. If he does respect his opponent on the feet, he'll be on the back foot in a defensive shell. But either way, whatever he does, Bilal Muhammad never grapples in the first 2.5-3 minutes of a round. But then against Leon Edwards, literally from like the first 30 seconds, he just absolutely grappled his dick off for 25 minutes non-stop, spamming takedowns, the whole 9 yards. It makes me think, man, if Duplessis gets on the secret juice and he does that to Izzy, with how weak Izzy looked off his back against Blachowicz, it could be an easy fight for Duplessis. If he gets on that same shit, like look at that outside trip. It's a beautiful outside trip off the body lock, but he doesn't have any success with it because Strickland's hard to hold down and he immediately scrambles over to the cage. But we saw what Izzy is like in that position, right? He just lies on his back. So I'm thinking to myself, if Duplessis just does that in 3 out of the 5 rounds, hits a nice outside trip like that, has a decent amount of top control to end the round in a dominant position, you could easily see Duplessis winning 3 out of 5 rounds with that sort of strategy. And then when we factor in that Izzy doesn't do a particularly good job of putting his stamp on rounds, like you could see a situation where maybe Duplessis puts 2 dominant rounds in the bank with grappling, the other 3 rounds are close, and then in terms of probabilities it's more likely Duplessis wins a decision, right? Because if you have 2 really dominant, like look at that double leg from Duplessis, right? If you put 2 dominant rounds in the bank and the other 3 rounds are close, it's more likely the fighter that put 2 dominant rounds in the bank will win a decision, because the other guy doesn't have any dominant rounds, right? He's got to rely on the judges scoring all 3 of the other rounds for him. It's not likely. So if we know Izzy struggles to put his stamp on rounds, and we know he's very weak off his back, like look at this wrestling from Duplessis, man. Like if Duplessis wrestles like this against Izzy, I think he wins. Now, to who said it, man? To Gunner's point, to Gunnar Amarson's point, he could be right. The Duplessis is one of these guys that slows down very quickly when he grapples. So let's see how Duplessis looks in this 5th round, because he's just hit suplexes, outside trips, inside trips. Let's see how Duplessis' cardio looks in this 5th. What I also like about Duplessis from like a game planning and strategy point of view is he's waited until the second half of the fight before he's really committed hard to his grappling, similar to what Blachowicz did, so that he doesn't burn himself out too early in the fight, right? He hasn't gone out there, grappled his balls off early in the fight, and then puts himself in a position where he's tired or adrenaline dumped, and then he's a sitting duck in rounds 3, 4 and 5. He's done the opposite. He's done it the right way. So sync up round 5 for me now, guys, which is going to be 28 minutes 30 seconds in. What I really like about that approach from Duplessis is Like in his head, his game plan's probably try to steal one of the first 3 rounds and then conserve enough energy to grapple hard in rounds 4 and 5 to have a dominant rounds 4 and 5 with my grappling, and then just try and steal one of the first 3 to win the fight 3 rounds to 2. It's smart. Be interesting to see how much grappling we get in this 5th round. So let's get it going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. What we're seeing from du Plessis here is basically the exact same game plan we saw Blachowicz use against Izzy. Just gonna message my wife and ask her to order some food. Order some dinner because she doesn't cook. I could get cancelled for saying that. I take that back. I could get cancelled. I better not say that again. Jesus. Jesus. The left will come after, the feminists will come after me hard, man, if I start talking like that. My God. My God. Anyway, we're going to see now what du Plessis' energy level is like, to see if he could be one of these guys who slows after just grappling a bit. Definitely does look flatter actually in this 5th round. Definitely looks flatter. Definitely looking flatter, man. So I think Gunner's right. Du Plessis could be one of these guys, if he just grapples a little bit, he slows down a lot. Like, look at how sloppy du Plessis looks in this 5th round compared to previous rounds. And we saw the same thing in the Darren Till fight, right? In round 1, remember when du Plessis was smashing Till with ground and pound up against the cage, and then he got the back take. In round 2, du Plessis looked super gassed. And then in the 3rd round, du Plessis looked fine, almost like he caught a second wind. So du Plessis looks like one of these guys, like Gunnar said, if he just grapples a little bit, he gets very tired, but then maybe catches a second wind and recovers. Because in this 5th round, du Plessis looks terrible. Again, really sloppy. Like, du Plessis' mouth is open wide, his hand speed is slow, sloppy on the feet. So that's something to watch out for. As soon as du Plessis just grapples a little bit, he tires out a lot. But nice double leg entry there. Big deep breath from du Plessis as they stand back up. Man, this fight is an interesting one. I think feeling really confident on either side is impossible. And I keep flip-flopping in my head who I would lean towards. Because I was very much leaning towards Izzy when we saw how bad du Plessis' boxing looked in the first 2 rounds. And then when we saw du Plessis start to grapple, I started to lean towards du Plessis. But then after just a little bit of grappling, like Gunnar said, he just looked very tired. But now, similar to the Till fight, it looks like du Plessis recovered and his hand speed has picked up again. he's such a strange fighter. He's very difficult to read because his hand speed was very slow and he looked very tired after round 4. But just a few minutes later, he seems to have fully recovered. Well, not fully recovered, right? Because he's tired and he's hurt. But he's a lot sharper in the second half of this round than he was in the first half. So du Plessis is definitely one of these guys that, you know, can catch second wins. And when he looks gassed, he's not necessarily going to be gassed for the rest of the fight. He can recover, which not a lot of guys can do, right? Usually if a guy is gassed or tired, they stay like that. Du Plessis, it doesn't appear that's the case. This fight is giving me a bit of a headache. Crazy, 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 man. Crazy, 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 crazy. Man. Oh, what's up, Blacksmith, mate? Yeah, man, I am on Twitter, Blacksmith, man. I'll leave a link on, I will leave a link on YouTube. I will warn you guys, though. Basically, I just use Twitter for talking shit about politics and stuff because I get annoyed about the world. So, like, my Twitter is just mainly for, like, I just mainly use it for, like, crypto and politics, if I'm honest. I don't really talk about sports too much on Twitter because the way I look at it, so many people talk about sports on Twitter. I'm like, they don't need me to talk about sports too. So I just talk about the world, man, pretty much. As I get older, I get more angry at the world. So I just use Twitter to, like, vent about the world. So if you don't like politics, it's probably not worth following me at the moment, man. But yeah, there's my Twitter, mate. What have we got? So Vera, yeah, Strickland is much harder to grapple than Izzy. So Strickland is really, really difficult to hold down, which is why every time du Plessis took him down, he was just immediately able to scramble back up to his feet. But as we saw in the Blachowicz fight, Izzy just lies on his back, just accepts being on the bottom. Yeah, I think you could be right, Pep, man. Pep's just saying it could be a situation where the odds are accurate. Like, whenever you flip, like, the way I always, like, the way that I treat pre-fight bets is, if I, like, the only pre-fight bets I place is where, like, it's so obvious it's a good bet it punches me in the face. Like, the more that I have to think about a bet, the more likely it is for me that it probably isn't a good bet. Because if you really have to think about it, you're probably just trying to talk yourself into something. Whereas if it's not immediately obvious, then there probably is no bet to place. Yeah, I think you're right, Pep, man. Alright, let's take a look at Strickland versus Izzy, and then I'm probably going to be done with this one. I might watch the Izzy versus Vettori fight off stream, only because we've been going for a long time now. How long have we been going for? I think we've been going for a few hours, only because I'm going to get some food. I think my wife's about to order food, so I might watch a Vettori fight myself just to learn a little bit more about Izzy's takedown defense. But I don't think Vettori gets him down in that fight. But no matter what the Vettori fight shows me, it's not going to change the fact that Izzy looked super weak off his back against Blachowicz. And du Plessis' takedown entries are a lot better than Blachowicz's. Like, those outside trips off the body lock that du Plessis was hitting are going to be way more effective than the kind of takedowns Blachowicz was shooting. So the Vettori fight's a bit irrelevant, because even if Izzy's takedown defense looks amazing against Vettori, it doesn't change the fact that if you do put him on his back, then he's very, very weak off his back. You know what I mean? So Hamilcar, the only reason why I would not say du Plessis is a lock is because Izzy's takedown defense isn't terrible. Like, Izzy's one of those guys that is hard to get down. But if you get him down, he appears to be really weak off his back. And the problem with du Plessis is I do think he's the kind of guy that could burn through a lot of energy going for takedowns, and if he doesn't get them, gas himself out. So Izzy is a tricky one because for the most part his takedown defense is very good. But in the Blachowicz fight he gave up really cheap takedowns. Generally I just hate betting on guys that lie on their back and show no attempt to get back up to their feet. Like, you guys know me, I don't bet many big favourites in MMA. It's rare I bet big favourites, but I did bet Yusuf Zalal in a parlay last week just because Jano Errans is so weak off his back that if Zalal just grappled a little bit, it was going to be the easiest fight of Zalal's career. Like, Errans, exactly like Izzy, one of these guys, you take him down, he just lies on his back doing absolutely nothing. I hate guys like Errans, Izzy, that just show no effort to get back up to their feet. It drives me nuts, man. Alright, let's get this Izzy versus Strickland fight going. Let's get it going. Sync it up in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Let's go, 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 go. Let's go. Let's go. Do you know what? I do probably agree with Pep, man. I think that it's kind of hard to even pick a side here. I will say that the side to pick is probably Izzy, only because you get pretty much the same payout in the odds on either guy, right? You get like, what, 20% extra payoff if you bet du Plessis, maybe like 25% better, something like that. But not a massive difference in the payoff no matter who you bet. So both guys pretty much the same odds range. The way I would look at it is, right, this is a really complicated fight. It's complicated because we don't know what version of Izzy is going to show up. It's complicated because we don't know what game plan du Plessis is going to use. The way I would look at this is, if both guys show up and perform to their full potential, it should be a pretty easy fight for Izzy, because he's a much better striker. I don't actually think du Plessis is that dangerous on the feet. I think he's very sloppy, and I think the power in his hands diminishes pretty quickly. I think past round 2, du Plessis probably doesn't have knockout power. And if you think about it, like, he's gone the distance with Brad Tavares. He almost went the distance with Till. He got a finish on the ground. The Whittaker fight was kind of weird. Whittaker got rocked off a jab and never came back. Went the distance with Strickland. Izzy's only ever been knocked out once in his career, right? Against Pereira in the first fight. Obviously, we're not including kickboxing fights in that, but in MMA, Izzy's only been knocked out one time. Although he did get wobbled by Strickland. But the way I would look at this is, my lean would probably be Izzy, just because he has home advantage. If he has built a career off using performance enhancing drugs, now there's no USADA drug testing, we could get the best version of Izzy we've ever seen. And I know the same can be said about du Plessis, but obviously the whole Nipplegate scandal, more plates, more dates, analysing Izzy's body type, suggests that Izzy probably has dabbled in the past, so you'd think he would dabble even more now that there's basically no drug testing. Izzy's takedown defense is good. So if both guys show up and perform to their full potential, it's unlikely Izzy is going to accept being in bad positions on the ground. He's going to show a bit more urgency to scramble back up to his feet. And in order for this to be a good fight for du Plessis, I think he has to get the version of Izzy that we saw against Blachowicz, where he is just very accepting of being on the bottom. And if Izzy has got the fire back and he is on PEDs, I just don't see him lying on his back like that without making any attempt to get back up to his feet. And what the Darren Till fight shows us is that du Plessis doesn't have like the heaviest top game. Like, we know Darren Till is really weak off his back. The Derek Brunson fight showed us that. Like, Till is also a guy that will just lie on his back, making no effort to get back up to his feet. So if Darren Till is able to work his way back up to his feet multiple times from underneath du Plessis, you'd think Izzy would also be able to if Izzy's got the fire back, the hunger, the desire. So my lean is Izzy. But there's two huge risk factors with betting Izzy. The first being we don't know what version of him we're going to get. And the second being, it doesn't matter how weak du Plessis' top game is. If you're just going to lie on your back and make no effort to get back up to your feet, it's going to be easy for anyone to hold you down. So sync up round 2 for me now, guys. It starts at 9 minutes 49. Starts at 9 minutes 49. WizKid is saying, gun to his head, he takes Izzy all day, but he's going to save this for live betting. I think that's probably the best plan, man. Probably going to do the same, mate. Hamilcar is saying, he's 35 years old. He has had a 1-year layoff, and this is the kind of pressure Mark Damaris saying, I think Izzy being on PD is a real possibility and has to be accounted for. If his physique stayed the same since his last fight, I'd be more confident in DDP. It would be interesting to see how Izzy looks at the weigh-ins, right? Actually, shall we take a look at his Instagram? What do we think, PD experts, man? Do you look any different? What do you think, guys? What is interesting about these images is it shows him defending takedowns. Right? There's some wrestling training in there. Is that giving us a bit of a clue that he's preparing for... Oh, he does look bigger than usual. He does look kind of big. Obviously, he's going to be cutting weight, but does look quite big, man. He does look quite chunky. What do we think, guys? We'll leave that up in the background. I'll leave that up. Oh wow, I'll have to watch that, Connor, man. Connor is saying that Chael Sonnen's done a video where he is he's saying that Izzy is on steroids. That's really interesting because Chael obviously is a self-proclaimed expert in PEDs. He said back when he was fighting, he could look at a guy and tell you exactly what PEDs he was on because he knew the game so well. So I'm going to watch that video, see what Chael says. Obviously, I do love Chael, but I worry about him a little bit because I do think a lot of the content Chael makes is for clicks and views. I worry a little bit about Chael's opinions because I feel sometimes he's kind of just saying stuff to get people to like share his content and talk about his content, but be interesting to see what Chael does say. He knows a hell of a lot more about PEDs than I do. Again, what we're seeing in this fight though from Izzy is just an inability to put his stamp on rounds. He's one of these guys that just kind of chips away at you. And so even though he's levels and levels and levels above Duplessis, Duplessis just got that doggedness about him. That volume, that aggression. And that can close the skill gap a lot. Like, as I'm watching this fight, you kind of just see Izzy chipping away at Strickland. But he's not really damaging Strickland. He's not hurting him. You can see he's not able to back Strickland up and get respect in there. I could see a situation where Duplessis just kind of walks him down, loading up on those big sloppy power strikes. But Izzy's just not able to get respect in there and isn't able to hurt him. Duplessis does have that tanky physicality about him. Is he just going to be able to walk through everything that Izzy throws at him? You know? Like you can see here, Izzy is landing clean hard head strikes, but they're not bothering Strickland at all. It's almost like Izzy doesn't have the power to hurt Strickland. Strickland stood right in front of him, and no matter what Izzy throws at him, Strickland just keeps coming forward. And you know Duplessis got that about him, where he can do the same. He's so tough, he's so durable. I mean, you'd say he's tougher and more durable than Strickland, right? Alright, let's get into the next round. Let's get into it, man. So the next round, round 3, starts at 16 minutes and 2 seconds. Let's sync it up, 16 minutes and 2 seconds. Blacksmith Bets is saying this fight's got pass written all over it. I agree with you, man. It is tough. It's a tough one. It is a tough one. Now, I do disagree with you there, Mark. I do disagree with you, mate. I think Blacksmith is right on this. So, when we go back to like pre-USADA days, right, 2015, 2016, when we go back to like 2015, 2016, back then guys like Nate Diaz was saying everyone's on steroids. I think it was Nick Diaz, one of the two. They were saying everyone's on steroids. And George St. Pierre alluded to him retiring because he basically alluded to most of the guys in the top 10 being on steroids. And back then I thought that's impossible. Like, there's no way that the sport could be like that. There's no way that most fighters could be on steroids, right? They just wouldn't be able to get away with it. They wouldn't be able to keep a secret. fighters would be like throwing each other under the bus all the time when they fall out, saying this guy's on steroids, this guy's on steroids. Like, remember when Cody Garbrandt and TJ Dillashaw were having that beef when they fought for the title? And in a press conference, Cody Garbrandt basically said to TJ, "You literally on every PED under the sun." And this was before TJ popped for using EPO. The sport changed so much when USADA came into effect that, like, for me, it's absolute definitive proof that I would say more than 75% of fighters in the UFC were on some type of performance-enhancing drug pre-USADA. And it's not necessarily like performance-enhancing drugs such as like steroids or EPO or HGH. It's not necessarily that, but it could be like weight-cutting aids, diuretics, even like banned medications like painkillers and stuff, you know. The sport changed so much when USADA came into effect that it was quite clear to me like the majority of fighters were on PEDs back then. So it's probably going to get to the stage where the majority of them are going to go back onto that. It might take a few years because obviously now, you know, we're in an era where a lot of the roster aren't on performance enhancing drugs because of USADA drug testing. But the further we get away from USADA drug testing, I think the more PEDs will work their way back into the sport. And it's good for the sport, I think, because it just creates these super mutants, which are just way better athletes. And as a result, we get way better fights. Like, the UFC got significantly worse when USADA came in. Like, the UFC was way more entertaining pre-USADA. You just had all these super mutants. They were way more athletic. You know, fighters fought injured less. They had more energy, better cardio, better at recovering. So I think it's a good thing, but makes fights like this interesting with guys like Izzy, who you know have maybe dabbled in the past. See how he's gonna look. So Mika Reynolds is saying how much GSP's body type changed after he'd retired, basically indicating that he stopped using performance enhancing drugs and as a result shrunk in size. GSP was all, and Alistair Overeem, great example as well, man. Do you know what? Let's get into round 3. So round 3 starts in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. So you know what? It wasn't the body transformations which was the most shocking thing about USADA coming in for me. It was how much fighters changed. So like you get guys like Anthony Pettis that went from running at the side of cages doing like kung fu kicks against guys like Benson Henderson to just looking so flat and slow. You have guys like Johnny Hendricks before USADA would literally knock guys 8 feet across the octagon. I don't think Johnny Hendricks like had a single win by knockout after USADA came in. So pre-USADA, Hendricks was like this devastating knockout artist, and then post-USADA he had like no power in his hands. And Luke Rockhold is a really interesting one as well. Like we were saying earlier on, you know, the UFC were on about doing a super fight between Rockhold and John Jones. You know, there were people that thought Luke Rockhold could actually beat John Jones. They were saying Luke Rockhold was pound for pound best fighter in the world. Then as soon as USADA comes in, straight away his chin goes. Straight away his cardio goes. Like, it's just bizarre, man. Like, all these guys, they just changed. Not like how they look physically, but just what they were capable of. Like, it literally flipped the sport on its head. Like, back when I was betting in 2015, 2016, I went on one of the worst losing streaks in my career. Like, a real bad patch. Because what was happening was, I was researching fights based on, you know, like Johnny Hendricks' last 2-3 fights. So when he would fight someone like Kelvin Gastelum in one of his first fights after USADA came in, I was like, this is going to be one of the easiest fights of Johnny Hendricks' career. You know, Gastelum's got no takedown defense, no ground game. Hendricks is a former NCAA Division 1 level wrestler. Hendricks has out-grappled all these top welterweights. Like, Gastelum hasn't got a chance. And then you look at that fight back at UFC 200, I think. And Hendricks couldn't hit a takedown. You know what I mean? He had no energy. He looked flat. He looked slow. And I'm there like, what the fuck has happened here, man? This isn't the version of Hendricks we've seen in the past. So yeah, I went on a really bad losing streak when USADA first come in, because I was basically capping fights based on footage of fighters which wasn't relevant anymore, because fighters had changed so much. And then you get other situations where you have like Luke Rockhold versus Mike Bisping. You know, Bisping was just a gatekeeper, no power in his hands, not the best takedown offense or ground game. You know, Tim Kennedy caused him big problems with the grappling heavy game plan. Tim Kennedy's another guy that declined a lot when USADA came in. But anyway, you look at Luke Rockhold versus Bisping. It was a rematch in their first fight. Rockhold completely outclassed him, completely dominated him. You know, Bisping was nowhere near competitive in their first fight. USADA comes in and you get a situation where Bisping steps up to fight Rockhold on 1 week's notice. So bearing in mind, Rockhold has already beaten Bisping, dominated him. Absolutely dominated him pre-USADA. Post-USADA, Bisping comes in on like 5 days notice and knocks Rockhold out. Even though Rockhold had a granite chin. You know, it's just crazy, man. USADA changed everything. It was mad. It was mad. It was a tough time to bet back then. So we're probably seeing things in reverse now, right? We're probably seeing the inverse of it. You know, we're probably seeing things go the other way with betting, where, you know, I will say this. I'm only gonna say this. I'm only gonna say this on live stream, and I would never make a video about this. I would never say this in a video, and I would never tweet this out, because ultimately I just like to keep myself to myself and do my own thing, right? But because there probably aren't even many people going to watch this far into the live stream, right? I will say this. If you look at all the top MMA handicappers in the world right now, not all of them, but if you look at like the top 20 MMA handicappers in the world, and you take away their results from other promotions, right? So if you look at the top 20 MMA cappers in the world right now, and you just look at their results betting on the UFC, and you take all the PFL, all the Invicta, all the LFAs, all the one championship bets out of it, you just focus on UFC. A lot of the top 20 MMA handicappers in the world are floating around break even betting on the UFC for the last year. A lot of the top 20 MMA handicappers in the world aren't actually profitable or very profitable on the UFC in the last year. And like I said, I would never say that on Twitter. I would never say it on a video, just because it's just something that I've done. I've looked into myself, done my own research, just to kind of basically try and prove a theory I have, that at the moment the sport is just super unpredictable, because we're seeing the opposite of what we saw in 2015-2016, where in 2015-2016 it was very difficult to bet the UFC, because everyone was judging fighters on footage which was no longer relevant, because so many fighters had transformed what they were capable of due to no longer being able to use performance enhancing drugs. And I think the reason why so many top MMA handicappers now are struggling on the UFC in the last year is because it's the opposite, where, you know, you're judging Belal Muhammad for his performance against Vicente Luque, and you're judging Leon Edwards for his performance against Kamaru Usman, and you're thinking, well, Belal Muhammad hasn't got much physicality to his grappling. His top game's not the best. We just saw, you know, Kamaru Usman struggle to hold Leon Edwards down. Kamaru Usman is a much stronger, much more physically imposing grappler than Belal Muhammad. Therefore, you know, this could be a pretty good fight for Leon Edwards, because if Belal Muhammad's not able to hold Vicente Luque down, and Kamaru Usman's not able to hold Leon Edwards down, then how the hell is Belal Muhammad going to be able to hold Leon Edwards down, right? And so people bet all kinds of bets related to Leon Edwards, like parlays, all sorts of shit, right? Everyone picks Edwards. But then we get a completely different version of Belal Muhammad show up that looked nothing like he did in the past. And so we're kind of getting the opposite now of what we had in 2015, 2016. So when you look at how some of the top MMA handicappers in the world are doing right now, they're not doing great on UFC. You know, their profits are still doing great when you look at MMA as a whole. all the different promotions, because obviously the drug testing picture hasn't changed in other promotions, so their edge is still the same. But for the UFC, it's fucking hard because USADA going and shaking everything up, and it's just very interesting. I had the theory that might happen, and if you go look at the last year, a lot of people are struggling. I'm not saying everyone, not everyone's struggling. Some people are still doing great, but a lot of people are actually struggling. But that will change. Obviously, the further we get away from USADA disappearing, the easier the sport will become to bet again. Because if you think about it, right now when we're researching fights like this, we're still judging Plessis and Adesanya on performances from like 2021, 2022, 2023 when USADA drug testing was in play. But a year from now, most fighters will have competed 2 or 3 times, since USADA went a year into the future from now. Like this time next year, August 2025, we'll probably have 2 or 3 fights from both Plessis and Izzy from a time when there was no USADA drug testing. So then when we're researching them, our edge will come back. We'll get a much bigger edge on pre-fight bets because we'll be judging fighters based on the skills they're capable of demonstrating and performing with as it exists in that time. Whereas now if we research an Israel Adesanya fight from 2023, it isn't that useful to us, because if he's on the secret juice, he could look exponentially better this weekend against Dricus du Plessis. So basing a betting decision on how Adesanya looked in 2023 isn't that useful. But then the same could be said about du Plessis, because he could be on the secret juice as well. So where we're trying to cap fights and make money betting on these fights at the moment is very difficult, because there's like another giant layer of uncertainty which we didn't have before. But the sport will normalise, it'll stabilise, and then it'll become a lot easier to bet against. So it's a lot more risky at the moment, man. So anyway, let's get into this 4th round. Let's go, let's get into it. So sync it up, get it going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Let's go, 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 go. So yeah, it's tough at the moment, man, to bet these fights, because you just don't know what version of these guys we're going to get. There's no smoke without fire. Izzy's steroid nipple suggests, he might have built his early career off PED usage, so he could be back on it now. But then du Plessis, with his tankiness, he fits the profile of someone that could be on the secret juice as well. So it is tough, especially if, like me and Blacksmith, you think that pre-USADA a huge percentage of the roster were on PEDs. I think they were, man, because I saw the sport change so much in a short space of time. There's no other explanation for it. And what I will say is, maybe my percentage of 75% of UFC fighters being on PEDs pre-USADA is aggressive. But I will say this, if I'm wrong, and there's going to be no way to know if I'm wrong or right, there's no way we'll ever know. But what I will say is, if you look at the top 5 fighters in every division pre-USADA, and then look at the top 5 fighters like 18 months after USADA, totally different. Totally different. Because if you think about the middleweight division, right? Who was like the top 5, top 10 guys in the middleweight division pre-USADA? It would have been Luke Rockhold, Chris Weidman, Lyoto Machida, Vitor Belfort, all these guys. Literally, as soon as USADA came, all these guys disappeared. Like, gone. If you look at the lightweight division, who would it have been? It would have been Anthony Pettis, Rafael dos Anjos. Who else? I can't think right now. Can't think. But like RDA, after USADA came in, couldn't make 155 anymore. Had to take a break and then go up to welterweight. Pettis' career fell off a cliff. Changed the sport, man. Big time. Big time. Trying to think of welterweight. What happened at welterweight? So it was Robbie Lawler's era, right? Just after USADA. So it would have gone from Johnny Hendricks, GSP, Hector Lombard, those type of guys. Replaced by like Robbie Lawler, Tyron Woodley, I suppose, in the title picture at that time. Yeah, Aldo's a good example. Conor, man. Aldo was one of the most dominant champions in UFC history, and then when USADA came in, he just changed. He changed, man. So anyway, guys, as we get towards the end of this stream, let me know what you think about this fight. I'm going to pass. I do think it's an amazing fight for live betting. It's also a tricky fight for live betting because, as we've seen in Plessis, when he gasses, he doesn't necessarily gas for the rest of the fight. He does catch second wins and recover, which does make him difficult to read, because at one point in a fight it might look like he's really struggling, but then all of a sudden he gets his shit back together. And he did this in round 3 against Till and also round 5 against Strickland. So he's very deceptive. What I will say this fight has taught us about Izzy, this fight has taught us 3 things about Izzy. The first is, he may not have enough power in his hands to get respect in there. Strickland has walked him down with his hands down low, stood right in front of Izzy, and no matter what Izzy's landed, he hasn't been able to back Strickland up. And Plessis has that kind of tanky physicality about him, where he will walk Izzy down and try to do the same thing, right? He walked Strickland down and didn't show Strickland any respect. So I do think Izzy, obviously if he's on the secret juice it can change, but if Izzy fights like this, he might not have the power to get respect in there. The second thing that we've noticed about Izzy is that he does struggle to put his stamp on rounds. He just doesn't have a particularly judge-pleasing style, partly because he's backing up and circling away all the time, and also partly because, again, he doesn't land the hardest, most impactful shots. And then the third thing that we've learnt about Izzy is that he doesn't fight with a sense of urgency. And we saw this in the Blachowicz fight. Yes, he got more aggressive in round 3, but at the same time in rounds 4 and 5, he showed no urgency to work his way back up to his feet after being taken down. And here, he's clearly losing the fight against Strickland, but he's not trying to do anything differently. He's not fighting with a sense of urgency. Compare that to Plessis in rounds 4 and 5 against Strickland, where you could see Plessis realise the fight was close, and look at how much more aggressive he got in rounds 4 and 5 to try and put dominant rounds in the bank. So now, let's get this 5th round going. Sync it up, get it going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And that'll be it for this live stream. I think while I'm having some food, I'm going to watch Izzy versus Vettori, maybe Izzy versus Pereira as well. Although, I don't think those fights are going to give us tons more information. I might watch Plessis Whitaker as well, but if I watch all those fights, this stream's going to end up being about 5 hours long. So I think I'll have some food and watch those fights. We got the football on now, so we'll go watch the Burnley game, live bet the Burnley Luton game. Don't want to miss any live bets on that. Burnley winning 1-0 already. Wah wah wee wah. Wah wah wee wah. Interesting. Nice one, Connor. Thanks a lot, mate. I really appreciate it, man. I've almost finished researching the main card now. I haven't found any bets yet for the main card, but the only fight on the main card left I got to do is Usyk versus Kara France. I did Gamrot, Hooker earlier, as well as Prates, Jing Liang. What was the other fight I did? I've forgotten. Oh, Tuivasa versus Rosenstrike. I will say this. I was surprised at how bad Tuivasa's boxing is. I thought when I saw Tuivasa as a decent underdog, thought he could be a good bet. He's got home advantage, he hits hard, but striking is so sloppy, he's so bad defensively. It's actually a great fight for Rosenstrike, and I understand why he's such a big favourite now. Oh, nice one, Bear. Thanks a lot, mate. I really appreciate it, man. Cheers, Bear, mate. Thanks a lot, dude. Appreciate the kind words, mate. Do you know what, Kambumin, mate? I don't necessarily like Du Plessis in this fight, but I just think that I don't see this being an easy fight for either guy. I think there's things both of them can do to cause the other issues. So I think this is going to be one of those really competitive fights and someone wins a decision 3 rounds to 2. I don't see like either of them having like, they do have advantages over each other, right? Izzy's definitely the better striker, Du Plessis definitely the better grappler. But I don't think either guy's advantages in those areas are big enough to the point where either of them can dominate. So, for example, you know, every once in a while we get these fights where it's like, it doesn't matter what one fighter's like, it doesn't matter what one guy's striking is like, because the other guy is so much better than them in striking that they're definitely going to win. And the other guy doesn't have the takedown offense or ground game to take him down. This isn't like that, because Izzy is a better striker than Du Plessis. But because he struggles to put his stamp on rounds, I wouldn't be so sure that Izzy can win dominant rounds on the feet. He might just edge him, but then you're relying on very bad MMA judges doing their job. And then on the flip side, you look at Du Plessis' offensive wrestling, and it's pretty good. But then Izzy's takedown defense is pretty good. So it's like, even though Izzy has the advantage on the feet, it's not a huge advantage because he does struggle to put his stamp on rounds, and Du Plessis does throw a high volume of strikes and he does hit hard. And then if you look at Du Plessis' grappling, he does have a big advantage on the ground, but not a massive advantage because Izzy's takedown defense is pretty good. So it's one of these fights where, like, both guys definitely have their advantages in different areas, but not to the level where you'd expect them to dominate in those areas. It's just a very interesting fight, man. It's really, really interesting. And I don't feel too confident either way. So for me, the odds are probably where they should be. Robert, mate, I don't really mind Leon losing, man. It doesn't make too much difference to me, man. Doesn't make too much difference. So Bear Cash. So I ended up on like proper money line bets, like serious football bets. I ended up losing 1 unit on Copa America. I only placed 1 bet on Copa America. I think I bet on both teams to score in the Uruguay-Colombia semi-final when Colombia had a player sent off. So I lost 1 unit on Copa America. And I think I made about 1.5 units on the Euros. I think I went like 5-3 or something like that on the Euros. So, bit of a nothing burger, those international tournaments, man, for me this year. And got destroyed on prop bets, but I don't bet too much on props anyway. Pepino is asking what books I use. So, basically, at any one time I have 10 betting accounts. So, basically, I have 10 betting accounts. And I bet, like, so if I'm placing a bet, I'll place a little bit on each of the 10 accounts. And then when one betting account gets closed down, I'll replace it with another. So in the UK, we've got access to like 80 plus betting sites, loads and loads of betting sites. So even though I do get closed down and restricted on them, I cycle through them. So like if I get closed down on one, shouldn't really say this, but when I get closed down on a betting site, basically, is the stream still going? Sorry, I thought the stream cut out. There we go. So yeah, I have like 10 betting accounts, and there's like 80 plus betting accounts we can access in the UK. So say for example, I have an account with William Hill, and that gets restricted. Then I don't have an account on William Hill anymore, right? But I might open up another account with like Virgin Bet. So then bang, back to 10 accounts. And what I'll do is I'll keep working my way through all these accounts, which will take a while, because it takes a while to get 80 betting accounts closed down, right? You think you've got 80 betting sites, it's going to take a long time to have 80 betting accounts closed. And then by the time I work my way back around those 80 betting sites, I'll just open up another William Hill account. And by the time I've gone through the cycle of opening up like 80 betting accounts, it's a lot easier to open up another William Hill account than if you had a William Hill account closed and then you immediately set up a new one. Like, you can, and for the longest time in my career I did do that, because when I first started betting on the UFC, there were only like 3 or 4 betting sites in the world where you could live bet on the UFC. So back then I was getting closed down on the same sites all the time and immediately setting up new accounts on these sites. But back then it was a lot easier to do, because I started betting or started live betting on the UFC 15 years ago. Back then the technology on betting sites was a lot more primitive. Now they use a lot of machine learning, a lot of AI to identify profitable players and shut you down very quickly, or identify people that have previously had accounts with them. And not all betting sites are very sophisticated with AI and machine learning. Websites in the United States are very primitive. They're probably 10-15 years behind betting sites in Europe. The ones in Europe are very sophisticated. So yeah, I just rotate through all my accounts, try and use as many little tricks as I can to extend the life of accounts. That's pretty much it, man. I always have 10 accounts on the go. That's pretty much it. And then yeah, in terms of betting accounts, so I have like 8 or 9 betting accounts at all times, and I have my brokerage account then as well. So my brokerage account is basically, it's like a platform where you open an account with a brokerage, and then they will place bets on your behalf on websites that you can't access and sites that won't shut you down. So my broker allows me to place bets on Pinnacle Sports, which I can't access from the UK. They don't accept UK players, and a bunch of Asian sports books which don't limit players either. So I've got my brokerage. The downside of the brokerage is that you can't live bet the UFC on it, or you can, but it's fucking terrible. So on the brokerage, the problem with the brokerage is, if you live bet on the UFC, you'll know that the odds move really quick on the UFC. So even though you can live bet through the brokerage on the UFC, the problem is, the way the brokerage works is, when you place a live bet, the brokerage will take your bet, and then they will send the bet, or go to try and place the bet on your behalf with their software, like Pinnacle Sports or whatever, and then they'll come back to you and confirm the bet. But that takes like 30 seconds to a minute. So if the odds change in that 30 seconds to a minute where the brokerage is trying to place the bet on your behalf through their software, then the bet will get rejected, because the odds that you tried to place the bet at weren't the odds when they tried to place the bet for you. So it's almost impossible to use the brokerage to live bet on the UFC, because the odds change so much that, like, you're lucky if like 10% of your bets actually get confirmed, all the others get rejected. And there is a feature you can have where you can just force the bet through at any odds you want, but the danger with that is that it works out very bad, because it doesn't matter what the odds change to, your bet will get confirmed at those odds. So like, say for example you want to bet a guy at odds of like 1.80 minus 125, and you go to place the live bet, and then he like scores a knockdown or something, or he gets a takedown, his odds might crash to like 1.10 minus 1000, and obviously you don't want to place the bet at those odds, but the bet might still get confirmed at those odds because you had the setting which said just force the bet through. So yeah, on the brokerage, live betting the UFC is very, very bad, which is why I've still got to have all the regular betting sites. But yeah, nice one. Thanks a lot for watching, everybody. Hope you had I've got a message. Hope you all had a good night. Hope you have a great night. And nice one, guys. Take care. I'll see you all very soon. Love you all, boys. I'll drop a breakdown video on YouTube tomorrow as well, man. So nice one, guys. Take